Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's warm in here, so we'll make sure we kick us off reasonably on time. It's my just going to call the meeting to order. This is a regularly scheduled council meeting of July the 8th, 2024. We are both here in the building and streaming online. As we call the meeting to order, we just want to acknowledge that we're hosting this meeting in the traditional territories of the Coast and the Straits Salish peoples. And that specifically recognizes the Lekwungen people known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and that their connections to these lands and adjoining waters continue to this day. Our first item of business is simply to approve the agenda. Can I have a move and a seconder? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. That carries. We do have two members of council who are unable to join us in the room here today, but we have Councillor Green and Councillor Braithewaite who are unable to come into the office or into the chambers, but are thankfully joining us online, although I understand Councillor Braithewaite may have to run away at some point. We certainly appreciate you taking the time to be here. Next up is adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of June 24th. Move, adoption, seconded. Is there any changes, corrections, or amendments on those minutes? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. And then we just have to receive those three sets of committee meeting minutes.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Moving on to Mayor's remarks. I just want to give a brief explanation and congratulations. So Councillor Braithewaite is not here because she has just graduated from mother to grandmother, and is off participating with her daughter in Squamish right now to help that family get started. Very exciting and super cute pictures coming out of there. So congratulations, Councillor Braithewaite. We'll find out soon what your official name is. I'll call you a grandmother at this point, but whether it's a Mima or Granny or whatever you're going to be called, we'll find that out.
Thank you so much.
So there's lots of agenda items, and I just want to point out in terms of public input, particularly for those watching online through the YouTube stream, which is inherently delayed by a minute or two. If you are interested in speaking to council and you're going to be doing that online, just as the agenda item is coming up on the agenda, or even now, just you can log into the Zoom, either through the 1855 number or through the app, and you can just raise your hand at that time that the agenda item comes up. But sometimes that delay causes some havoc. If people are waiting for an agenda item, if we're moving through these items, we want to give people an opportunity to speak, but sometimes when we have this many small agenda items, we have to kind of move through them reasonably expeditiously. So thank you for that understanding, and we are looking forward to hearing from you. Just a few things that have happened over the last couple of weeks. First, want to just express my appreciation to council and staff who put together the district's first entry separately into the Pride Parade. We participated for a number of years with other municipalities, but this is the first time we've actually had a separate entry into that. We had representation from fire and police and many of the general staff, as well as members of council at that. So thank you for that. Also, just an update on the police board. We've had 3 new members sworn in, so that we now have a full contingent of 7 members of the police board. In addition, we had the new deputy chief constable for Oak Bay Police, Chris Rice, was sworn in last week. So we now have a full contingent of police leadership. But I just want to thank. He had many friends and family, but also representation from police departments all across the South Island who came out in support of that inauguration ceremony. I was also able to attend in my role as chair of the police board Canada-wide session on police school liaison officers, a topic of much interest in this area. It was well attended from people all across the country, and I will be attending the Canadian Association of Police Governance conference this August, and that's going to be a topic there as well. So looking forward to what's happening across Canada on that matter. At the CRD, the Performing Arts Facilities Working Group has been reinitiated. So what that's going to be looking at is, are there mechanisms by which the region can better support regional performing arts facilities? And for those in the room who don't know, as an example, the Royal Theatre is currently owned by Oak Bay, Salish, and Victoria. The McPherson Theatre is owned wholly by the City of Victoria. That structure makes it very difficult for new investments to be made into new theatres. That Royal Theatre was built in 1912 to serve as the largest performing arts facility on the island. It is still the largest dedicated performing arts facility on the island, and so there's some consideration about how that might be managed looking into the future as we grow as a region. So that's been started up again. I also had the opportunity as chair of the Regional Hospital District to meet with Colliers and Regional Hospital District staff looking at their approach to doing a market analysis for the now former Oak Bay Lodge lands, as they're looking with Island Health at potential uses and seeing that land reused in the future. So that is not much to share there other than that work is ongoing, and I'm very appreciative of the hospital district staff who have been really instrumental in keeping that process moving. It feels glacial sometimes from the outside, but without their work, it would be going nowhere. Also just want to point out that the concerts in the park at Willows Beach have started, so that's Thursdays, and Tuesdays at Willows there's yoga in the park, so both free to attend and great community events. And this Wednesday is the second night market of the summer, so if you haven't been yet, it's a fabulous, we close off Oak Bay Avenue and there's a whole lot of artisans and vendors that show their wares there. So this Wednesday is the next one. That concludes my comments as the mayor's remarks. The next item is public comment and question period. So if you're here, either online or in person, to speak to items that are on the agenda that have public input, we'll take that public input at the time of the item on the agenda. But if you're here for things that are not on the agenda or things of general interest to Oak Bay, then this is just an opportunity to, basically we leave this space free for people, members of the public, to come and talk to us about items that are of interest to you, that you want to share with us, ideas, concerns, etc. So always the first one is hard to get going, so if there's anybody here who wishes, please come forward. So the process, you have up to 3 minutes each person, and you just ask that you turn the microphone on, state your name, your municipality of residence. You don't have to give your address, just the municipality, and then you have up to 3 minutes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Steve Gorham, and Oak Bay. I saw a couple of you at the Pride Parade on Saturday, so that was really nice to see, and I actually got candy. So thank you. This is I'll be well within my 3 minutes, I'm sure, but this is a question on process, Mayor, and it's meant out of curiosity, really. I'm not well versed in all the processes around the park. Sorry, Carnarvon Park. I'm not really well versed in all the processes that are involved in that, but one of the things that we're trying to get our heads around is the public consultation. And I'd understood that the public consultation on the options that were available had effectively closed with the survey that closed on May 10. And your decision on, the council's decision on what option would be moved forward would be through the survey results analysis from staff as well as other staff input. And so that's kind of where I think we're at. But I just read the Oak Bay News article, and you'd mentioned in that there was other options or other opportunities for input. And I just wanted to make sure that those options for input or consultation were for other parts of the process, not the decision on which option was moving forward.
Sure, I'll do my best to answer the question, and when I get it wrong, staff will jump in and correct me. So the process is, anytime we do any significant project, we always try and make a bit of a formalized process to ensure that we do it the broadest reach for public input. So that was the public, the open houses, the survey online, sharing the options, and we collect that through a process. It's not a survey in that we're trying to assess, did we get 31% in favor and 20, whatever percent against. It's really just to make sure that we're not missing anything, to share some of the ideas and collect that information. So that information will be coming back to council as part of the staff options that come back to us. At the point it comes back to council, pretty much all things that come back to council have public input, and so there's another opportunity at that point. Once we have all the information received, and all the information that council receives will be shared with the public at the same time. There's no differentiation of information. we'll all have a chance to see it at the same time. We'll have a chance to look at it. And then really, based on that, council will be looking at next steps. So those next steps will be influenced by that report, but also any additional public input that we get at that time, which is, at this point, I believe Ms. Williams still anticipated for September. Is that correct? Correct. Okay. Thank you. Okay. I just want to make sure that the formal portion is probably done, although we could always ask for something a bit more formal again, but we're now going to be in the next stage, is a bit more informal input as those options come back. Other members of public who wish to address council on items, again, not on the agenda, but of general interest to the community? Okay, everybody else is here probably for things that are on the agenda, so let's get to that. I want to make sure I look online, though, as well, and haven't missed anybody with a hand raised. I don't see anybody showing up in my queue. Just looking to staff, don't see. We're all good. Okay. Then moving on, let's go to section 7. This section, which is the 7.1, does not have public input. Each item on the agenda is flagged, whether or not it has public input or not, based on our procedures bylaw and the community charter. So with that, Mr. Bowles, since Mr. Green is not in the room, which I'm assuming I'm going to turn to you. This is really a report for information that we would just normally receive, but perhaps you can provide a brief overview of the statement of significance.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Green is away on holiday, so I'll do the honors. This report and this statement of significance that is attached to this report for the Oak Bay Marina buildings came to be following a recommendation from the Heritage Commission last year. And following up on that, Council requested that a statement of significance be prepared. It has been reviewed by the Heritage Commission recently, and it's here in response to that request. In terms of next steps, that's entirely up to Council. There's other processes on that side underway as well. And with that, I'm available for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I think the document is reasonably self-explanatory and self-supporting, but are there any questions that Council has to members of staff on the report? Councillor Watson, and then what? Oh, doesn't matter. Councillor Smart, and then Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I said a quick question for Director Bull, just with regards to statements of significance and acknowledging the chronology of dates before colonialism. I appreciated that there was mention in the report about Indigenous history, but the actual chronology of dates didn't really recognize the Indigenous stewardship that happened before colonialism, and it didn't sit with me quite right, but I'm not very familiar with the framework of these types of statements of significance, and I just wanted to know going forward, is that something that we can and should request a more fulsome look at history being before colonialism?
Mr. Bola, my recollection of this, we were asking for a statement of significance on the buildings specifically, but I can't be, perhaps that be an explanation, but please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for you, Mayor. Indeed, the scope of the statement of significance was focused on the buildings and the history of the buildings, and they're, of course, fairly recent. When I had a short chat with the writer of the statement of significance, she indicated that, there's, of course, much more history on this side, but it would either be an expanded statement of significance or more of a different statement of significance that looks at the whole site and the wider history of it. But that was not quite the scope of this particular assignment as it was specified as this would be about the buildings specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson, and then Braithewaite.
Thank you, Mayor, and this is a question for staff. So in receiving this statement of significance, I just wanted to ask staff about, where does it then sit in the corpus of the kind of public information about the municipality? Typically, we would get one of these if we were going forward with a designation of a property, which hasn't, as far as I know, been discussed here. But in the absence of, let's presume that we were not doing that, what do we actually do with this to make it a meaningful contribution, I guess, to the life of the community or the history of the community?
Mr. Bull?
Yeah, thank you for the Mayor. Council could identify a couple of options here if you wish so. because there's other processes underway as well, it could be considered as part of that process before any decision is made what to do next. The other next step that could be undertaken is taking a more practical approach and look at the state of the buildings and what it might mean for the future if preservation and retention is preferred. So there's a couple of next steps that could be done. Other options that come to mind are adding it to the Heritage Register, or, of course, going to a designation of the buildings. We haven't quite delved into that in the report, given the limitations we had in time and the scope of the request, but there's definitely other options there that could be further explored. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for clarification, if we receive the report, it goes into our official files. Assuming a copy goes to archives, I don't think there's much more attached to it than that.
So it would still be searchable and retrievable if somebody was looking for it. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bowl, can I just confirm that is it a document that would be findable on the website? Yeah, Ms. Plouffe?
Thank you, Mayor Murdoch. Could you repeat that question, please?
The question was just really, would it be a document findable on the website? So people were curious about, I mean, this is the value of statements of significance, is there sort of they capture the narrative of the history, so is it a publicly available document?
Thank you for that clarification, Mayor Murdoch. So right now it would be searchable because it's actually attached to the agenda, but we can certainly add a space for it on the website if you think that would be something that you'd like.
We do have a space on the marina right now, I think. There's a little sub-page that's on the marina, so perhaps it could just be attached in there as part of a piece. And I know the website's being redeveloped, so who knows what it's going to look like exactly. Anything else, Councillor Watson?
Yes, this is also for staff, again, for Mr. Bowl, please. So we did receive some input tonight from 2 members of the community who looked at the statement and feel that it should be enhanced in some way. And I'm just wondering, a couple things. Given the original scope of the statement of significance, which was just with respect to the buildings, are the issues raised significant enough in your view to perhaps expand the scope of the SOS so that we could include them? And if so, is there actually a budget and a process that we could go back and ask staff to ask the consultant to do that work?
Mr. Bowl?
Yeah, thank you. I think the topic of interest is covered in the statement of significance shortly. Yeah, I don't know enough about the site to clarify if that's squarely with the building scope or a little bit wider history. I know that the consultant considered the input that was provided to her, and in her professional opinion, she drafted the statement as it is written right now. But I think it's a bit of a topic of wider use of the site that might be better suited for maybe if there's in the future further detailing of the history of the site. Those would be my thoughts. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. That's everything.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Councillor Braithewaite.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is around similar to Councillor Watson's. The letter that we do have as correspondence on this item from Jean Sparks, who, as we all know, is a very big advocate for heritage within our community. And she said if the heritage designation is to be considered, the statement of significance should not be limited to the current buildings, but encompass the value of the site as a whole. And I would tend to agree with that. So I'm wondering what we have to do to be able to make that happen.
My general recommendation, I think, here would be probably to, with very specific direction, refer it back to staff for additional information.
Okay, thank you. I will mull that over.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, I don't have any particular questions.
Councillor Green has her hand up.
Oh, thank you for that. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you for the report to staff as well. I would concur with the comments expressed by both Councillors Watson and Braithewaite. Jean Sparks has, decades of experience, as we know. I think her input is very valuable, and I really think we should honor it in some way. And I would certainly support any move or motion to expand that SOS so that the site itself, which is very significant, both from a community perspective, but also from a First Nations perspective, that SOS is expanded to include the rich history the site offers. So thank you.
Thank you. I have another suggestion as well that might make sense. I think we have to I would think a little separation between the technical document, which is a statement of significance, and the scope that it was asked for, which is the buildings, and the desire to capture a broader history of the site. And I'm wondering if we might, a better approach may be just to make a request through archives, if there might be some interest in some of the community volunteers in putting together a little brief history of the marina that captures some of those broader historical stories that could be put together. That might not be a statement of significance, but might actually capture a bit more of what I'm hearing here, which is the broader context and the scope. Because we're asking, I think the one is a technical document that's attached and meeting the needs of a statement of significance. But if we want something more broader in terms of cultural, that might be something that's better done in more of a historical manner than a building related or site related statement of significance. So that's one other suggestion I might have. And if people wish to take that away and mull on it, we could always take it as a motion arising at a future meeting, or if there's someone here that wishes to make that referral now, or I guess it would just be a request, because we don't really generally refer things to archives. We would make a suggestion to archives that could come back. Either one of those I think would be acceptable. So otherwise we have a motion to receive the statement of significance in front of us at this time. No, we don't have there's been no motion made at this point, so.
I will make that motion, Your Worship, to receive the staff report.
It's okay, moved and seconded. I'm going to suggest that if members of council wish to have the document itself changed, then this would be appropriate to, at this point when it's been moved to be received, to refer it. If people are more comfortable taking more of an approach to making a request of archives and seeing if we could get a broader history approach to it, then I would suggest we would take this motion as is and then consider that either as a later motion, a motion arising, or a later motion through a notice of motion process. Councillor Braithewaite?
Yeah, Mayor, I think I do feel pretty strongly about having some of this information included in the statement of significance. I'm not sure if that's supportable around the table, but I would like to see that included at this time. So that might be a referral back to staff to include some to expand the statement of significance to include some of the history of the site.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Smart? Go ahead, Councillor Braithewaite.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have to motivate much more, other than the fact that the letter that was included in the package did bring those questions to my mind, and I think it would behoove us to include that in additional information to give us a more fulsome look at or information about this site in total.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smart. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you. Through Mayor, I just echo. I think for me the purpose of this statement of significance was partly around another piece of information that would inform the Spihung site, and I think the more information we have around that would help our future decision making.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship. I'm afraid that I can't support the current motion to amend. Not that I don't think that additional information's not important. I think it is critically important, and I think all the arguments made to this point are significant. When we talk about additional contextual information about the site more broadly, I did understand this statement of significance to focus specifically on the architectural details of the buildings themselves, which do have an element of uniqueness and obviously are architecturally distinct. So I understood the statement of significance to focus primarily on those aspects. If we want to talk more broadly about the significance of the site's history, the correspondence does refer to part of that, but there's also additional history in the form of, obviously extensive First Nations history and other involvement of other organizations and individuals and much greater breadth than what is specifically referenced in the correspondence. So my question is where we draw the line on that, and if we do want that larger contextual piece of the site's broader history, that could encompass quite a lot of work. So if we're referring that back to staff and asking for a revised statement of significance that covers all of that context, then what is the boundaries of that? What are we including and what are we leaving out? I'm afraid that we're leaving out certain aspects of the site history by doing it in that way. So I'm not supportive of the current amendment as it stands.
Councillor Watson?
Thank you. Even though I did kind of raise this discussion initially, I follow Councillor Apperson's line of thinking. I think we got what we asked for, and staff have confirmed that Ms. Breers did receive the input that we see in front of us tonight, took it into consideration, did not include it in a report. It has been in front of the Heritage Commission, who passed it on to us with a recommendation to receive it. So at this point in time, I don't like the idea of scope creep on this exercise. We asked for something and we have been given it, and I would just be moving a receipt of the information with the understanding that if we make it available on the website, it is then a resource for the community. So I wouldn't be supporting a motion to do anything further than receive this tonight.
Thank you for that. Sorry, Councillor Green, your hand was up. Did you wish to speak, or is now lowered? No. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Braithewaite, you've already spoken to it. So Councillor Patterson, I'll come back to you if you wish to keep your hand up.
Yes,
thanks. I just wanted to just say that. Sorry, were you going to Councillor Patterson first?
I was going to.
Sorry, I'll let her go.
Okay, I got the first-time speakers first. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
yes, thank you. I think perhaps after the last couple of days that Councillor Braithewaite has experienced, she perhaps deserves first right to on this. But nevertheless, I appreciate the spirit in which it's brought forward. But I agree with the other councillors. Staff did as we requested. They brought forward this focusing on the buildings. I'm also mindful of the fact that we, as a district, and certainly as a council, we're undertaking to establish the historical significance with First Nations. We haven't really worked in that exercise yet. That's an important component that hopefully we will get to in the near future. And I think that once that is done, we will have a more fulsome understanding of a broader historical reference to the site, and at that time this can be added to whatever the findings are and a more fulsome report at that time. So I won't support the motion as it stands.
Thank you. I guess I'll speak as a first-time speaker first before I go back to Councillor Braithewaite. I have a hard time supporting the motion. I would like to have more historical context for the site. I think time spent on the original boathouse, which was a cornerstone of the community for many, many years. The original, work that started there that grew into the Oak Bay Marina, all very interesting pieces. But I do think that this came out of the reality that council is going to be having to look at options for Oak Bay Marina in terms of development, redevelopment, or reconsideration of use. There was an ask made by the Heritage Commission, which we all felt was a reasonable one, that said, well, what is the value historically of the existing buildings? And without the information of those buildings, we didn't have any context for which to make those decisions. That was the context we asked for this information. It will form important context for those future considerations by the community and council. But I think we just need to keep it to that for now. And I do think, though, that it's a great story. I have some of my own family history tied up in this. I'd love to see it told, but I don't think that the statement of significance is the right tool for that. I think we've got what we've asked for. Now we have the information required to inform land use decisions. If we want more than that, it should go through a different format than what we're asking for. Councillor Braithewaite?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm in disagreement with that. However, I understand where everybody's coming from, and it'll be at some point. I hope that we're able to move forward with this. But at the same time, I would like to say that if we do move forward with this at some time, if it's not today, then I would like to see Ms. Sparks and Ms. Denny involved in that process as well. Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. They're a wealth of knowledge on these things. So the motion's on the floor to refer this back to staff, I believe was the motion. Is that correct? Yeah. So a vote in favor would send it back to staff. A vote against would essentially bring back the original motion of receiving it today. So all those in favor of referral, Councillor Braithewaite, Councillor Green, Councillor Smart, and those opposed. I have Councillor Watson, Appleton, Patterson, and myself opposed. That motion does not pass, so we're back to the main motion of receipt. Is there any other discussion on the motion for receipt? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, that carries. Does anybody, it's probably better to do a motion arising, I would think, or not a motion arising, a notice of motion if people wish to ask. And probably I would ask that you work with Councillor Watson, you're the liaison currently to the archives. Perhaps work with Councillor Watson and if that's something of interest to see if there might be a stories aspect of that could come out. All right, then moving on to the next item on the agenda. This is open for public input. This is the award of tender 12-2024 for asphalt resurfacing program. Mr. Rennick is online, I believe.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. How's my audio level?
It's good at the front table. Can people in the audience hear him? Okay. You're good to go, Mr. Rennick.
Okay, I saw a thumbs up from the crowd. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is a very brief staff report summarizing the results of an open tender call for the asphalt resurfacing program for 2024. The district posted the tender on BC Bid in accordance with our sustainable purchasing policy. The district received 2 bids, and the lower of the 2, the bid from Island Asphalt Company, we are recommending that council approve entering into a contract with Island Asphalt Company in accordance with their tender submission. As it is a unit price contract, the tender price that is in the staff report is just there for comparison purposes and will not be the actual amount that ends up getting paid out over the life of this contract. That will depend on how much work is actually done. And I am happy to take your questions.
Are there any questions for members of council on this tendering bid? Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. I think I know the answer to this, but just for clarity and for the benefit of the public, this is an asphalt resurfacing contract for sort of as and when needed. It does not encompass those things which are capital works. When we do capital works and subsurface works, repaving after those works are completed is probably included. This is for quote unquote incidental paving that's identified as being high priority over the course of the year.
Mr. Rennick?
Through the mayor, Oak Bay does not have the ability to repave the roads ourselves other than filling potholes. So if there's a capital project that Oak Bay Public Works is doing, for example, the water main replacement that we did on Oliver Street last year, we would then use this paving contractor to repave the roads. When we do the larger scale construction tenders where a general contractor does an entire project, for example, Dalhousie Street, that paving is done as part of that contract. So I suppose the answer to the councillor's question is that it depends on who is doing the work.
It depends. The perfect answer, always. I don't see any other questions from council, so I'm going to go to members of the public. Any members of the public wish to talk to council about the asphalt tendering bid in front of us? Seeing any online? Anybody here? Not seeing anybody. I'll come back to this table. Can I need a motion to receive the report?
So moved, Your Worship.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed? And then a motion as
Your Worship, I would move the staff recommendation that the contract for 2024 asphalt resurfacing be awarded to Island Asphalt Company in accordance with their tender submission.
thank you. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that carries. You can see sometimes we get through these fairly quickly, so that was my request to people who were online and waiting. If you see something coming up, make sure you're onto Zoom so you can raise your hand in a timely fashion. We now move to the Windsor Park Playground Replacement Contract. Mr. Meikle is taking some well-deserved time off, and so we have Mr. Hidley, our Manager of Parks, here to provide a brief introduction for this tender award. Go ahead, Mr. Hidley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before you, you do find the report authored by Director Meikle, which is the Windsor Park Playground Replacement Contract. This is the second in a planned series of playground equipment upgrades in the district. And the proposed plan is to replace a minimum of one playground per year, although this is the second for this year. And the district recently approved the playground replacement policy, and this policy was utilized as the foundation for the evaluation of the bids, which was made also available to the potential bidders. Proponents were asked to submit 3 playground design options. We had five applicants, so 15 different proposals, and then they were evaluated by Director Meikle, myself, and the procurement specialist. So I'll leave that there, and I'll leave it open for any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hidley. Go ahead, Councillor Smart, and then Patterson.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I just wanted to know, with some of the other entries that may have been received, if we did receive some responses from local or British Columbia companies or companies that had a high level of environmental impact and sustainability.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. We did receive a bid from a British Columbia company. What I will say in the evaluation is that all of the playground equipment is made out of province, and although the rep was local, the installation is all done by local people for each of the companies. So it weighed a small degree in our decision, but for the most part, who we selected, it was a company where the equipment is made in Alberta but will be supplied by local installers, which was the same really for everybody.
Councillor Smart.
No, thank you. Through you, Mayor, just one additional question, and just with regards to, we're seeing a lot of really innovative playground designs, zip lines, rope climbers, naturalized playgrounds, and I wondered, did we receive bids that had sort of more innovative design proposals, and again, weighed against other things, this was still the best choice?
I would say yes, that was the best choice. Looking at, there were similarities to all of the submissions, but what we felt with CRS was mainly the integration of the poured-in-place rubber, the opportunity for shade, and the actual value of their play equipment we felt was equivalent to others that were considerably more.
Thank you. Councillor Braithewaite, next.
Thank you so much. Mr. Hidley, can you tell me, is this the same company who did the playground at Henderson?
Mr. Hidley.
Thank you, Councillor Braithewaite. No, it is a different company.
Oh, okay, because that was a great playground as well. So, I guess my comment is great work on all of the work that you're doing around implementing new playgrounds. And I don't have any more questions, Mayor, and I know you're going to get mad at me, but I'm online, so I'm going to take my chance and just say thank you very much for bringing this one forward. And I know that everybody in the community is so excited about getting another new playground, so thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add one quick thing is that CRS, and this did factor in a little bit, does belong to something called the Emmanuel Foundation, which repurpose playgrounds for underprivileged communities. I don't know if what will be left of the Windsor playground will qualify for that. I have still yet to have that conversation, but that is a possibility.
Thank you for that. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to Mr. Heidley. Thanks for the report, and I think that certainly the installation at Henderson was very well received. I think this one will also be. I'm quite comfortable with CRS. They have a very good reputation in the Canadian marketplace, at least. So, but I am wondering, it was referenced in the report that this was the only submission that met the budget. And so, because this is one of a few that we will be completing, were the variances, we're getting feedback, right? Were the variances substantial? Since we will be doing more of these in the future, I'm just wondering, where we're going on pricing with them. So perhaps, do we know in the ballpark of what the variances would be for some of the other suppliers that bid on the project?
Mr. Heidley?
CRS was the only company that did have 3 bids that were all under our budget. Other companies had individual proposals that were under budget, and some of the proposals were considerably more than what we had budgeted to, almost $200,000. So it was good for us to see that, to see what's available, but really when it comes to playground equipment, the world is really your oyster. It really depends on how much money you have to spend. It's incredibly expensive.
I thank you, Councillor Patterson. Are there any other questions? I just have one very quick follow-up to this one. No issue with the recommendations that is put forward here, but I think the next logical question there is, particularly in sites like this, which are major draws. We have tens of thousands of people who use the park and often bring children who use the playground, including programs at the Windsor Pavilion that use the playground. Should we be looking at a default budget that is higher, or have more flexibility on, particularly on these sites that are sort of central or draw playgrounds? I'm not entirely clear on how we came up with the exact budget allocated to this, other than it was in our capital plan over the next coming years. But over to you, Mr. Heidley.
I think of the Carnarvon Water Park as an example, where we've had to decommission the zip line, which is an expensive piece of equipment, not CSA approved, the one that we had there, very expensive. So there are a lot of play options from 0 to 12 or even further that are available, like zip lines, like climbing domes, that certainly could be considered. And working as the parks manager, I would strongly support that.
Okay, then a little follow-up question to this one. In this particular case, I know it's constrained by, it's an interesting drawing because it doesn't actually reflect the actual fields around it, but the space constraints that are there, that are reflected in these designs, is there space for additional play equipment in future on that site, or does these designs essentially use up all of the available space?
This design does use up all of the available space.
Okay.
And I will mention that a few pieces, the swing set, and there's another swing on site that will be added into this playground.
Thank you for that. Don't see any other questions, and we'll open this up for the public input, and then I'll come back to this table for any motions or discussions. Are there any other members of the public who wish to talk to us about the playground equipment at Windsor Park? Okay. Happy to come back to this table then. Councillor Smart.
Well, thank you. Through you, Mayor, just one additional question, just with regards to, you mentioned the ages 0 to 12, and that when I look at those playgrounds, it does evoke that, and I'm wondering, with regards to providing places for our youth to go between, say, 12 and 20, are there other things planned for Windsor Park? I know there's the tennis courts there, but as far as that, really attracting that safe place for youth to gather.
Mr. Heidley.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Yes, we do have a small sports court just by the tennis courts, just with a single basketball hoop, and we're working with one resident to come up with some planning for that, to improve that as a play area.
Thank you. I'm seeking a motion at this point to move this item forward. First item, I suppose, is just to receive the report.
So moved, Your
Moved
Worship.
and seconded, thank you. No discussion usually on receiving a report. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
I would move the staff recommendation, Your Worship.
Moved and seconded, thank you. Is there any discussion? I saw a hand online, but I think that was just to move and second it. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. Thank you very much, and thank you, staff, for the work done on it. So I understand this will now go out for public input to determine which of the three options gets chosen, and it'll come back. I guess it doesn't come back to this table at that point, does it? It just moves forward?
I think it just moves forward. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but yes, all three options will go out for a public comment.
Great, thank you. All right, section 9 is a series of items that, again, not subject to public hearing. So we'll try and move through these reasonably expediently. My mouse not working. So 9.1 water rate amendment bylaw. Is Mr. Rennick, are you introducing these? These are, at this point, just for adoption. So I'm happy just to move through them procedurally unless you wish to speak to them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't feel a need to speak to them.
Okay, then let's do these by resolution. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship. So I would move that water rate amendment bylaw number 4868, 2024 be adopted.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. We don't usually debate on adoption. We've had the debate prior unless there's something has changed. Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Moving on to 9.2. This is the Parks, Recreation, and Culture fees and charges. We've also, we already had first, second, and third readings, so we're here for adoption. Councillor Appleton, want to do the honors?
Yes, Your Worship. I would move that Parks, Recreation, and Culture fees and charges bylaw amendment number 4876, 2024 be adopted.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. We move from those bylaws to land use items. We have Uplands Siting and Design, which are have gone through design committee and sit here for us for approval or recommendation. I will move first to Upland Siting and Design for 3140 Tarn Place. Mr. Muller, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. The district has received an upland siting design application for the property located at 3140 Tarn Place to permit an addition to the existing accessory building to serve as the purpose of a storage and staff quarters for gardeners. For context, the subject property is zoned R2. It's roughly 1,800 square meters. It contains a primary residence, an accessory building constructed in 2017. It's located on the north side of Tarn Place. The applicant is proposing constructing a roughly 43 square meter addition to the north side of the existing accessory building, which is currently used as a covered parking. A review of the building plans and supporting materials was conducted by staff, and the proposed development is considered to adhere to the intent of the Upland Siting and Design Guidelines. The application went to the ADP on June 11th, at which time the panel voted to recommend application for approval by council. And if council so choose, the applicants for this file are in the Zoom room, I believe. Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muller. I'll certainly take questions from members of council to staff or the applicant. Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. With our infill housing project underway, I couldn't help but notice how this could potentially in the future be a future accessory dwelling unit. And I just wondered in general, when projects like this come forward, if the applicant was interested, can a project like this almost be pre-approved as an accessory dwelling unit, or down the line, if the applicant wanted this to be an accessory dwelling unit, would they need to come back with a future application? I was just curious how this process will go forward under our new infill housing. Thank you.
Mr. Muller, understand.
I can speak limited to that. The requirements for an accessory dwelling unit are much different than would be for an extension to the garage. There'd be things like energy step code, fire separation, which all require additional sets of plans with more detail that the building department would need. So there would be an additional, much more built-out plans, as well as the application and permitting process would be quite a bit different. So pre-approval, both in the design of the structure as well as our application process would be quite different.
Thank you for that. I don't see questions, so I'm happy to entertain a couple of motions. First, to receive the report. Moved, Councillor Watson, thank you, seconded. Usually discuss receipt. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? And Councillor Watson, go ahead, Councillor Watson, if you're ready.
I will move that the Uplands Upland Site and Design Application ADP 00175 to construct in addition to the accessory buildings for the property located at 3140 Tarn Place be approved.
Moved and seconded, thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Watson.
I would just comment, it did come, of course, to the advisory design panel, who were very pleased to be sending it forward with a recommendation to adopt. And I should just add, as the architect is here, that they expressed their extreme appreciation for such a beautiful design for a building that won't even be seen from the street, totally in keeping with the original building. So I think everybody's really pleased with what is about to happen.
Well, thank you. I don't see any other hands or comments, so before we go, I thank you, Councillor Watson, for noting that. It is, sometimes we go through these quickly, and it's true. It's a very well and thoughtful designed piece of addition. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. We move on to item number 9.4, which is an upland setting and design for 2850 Lansdowne Road. Before I go to you, Mr. Muller, I just thought maybe briefly, since there's a bunch of faces I haven't seen in the audience prior, just if you're wondering, the Uplands has a unique provincial law that requires all siting and design of houses to go through an approval process, and which is actually not allowed in other jurisdictions of the community. So it's an odd little hangover from 1935. That process goes through a professional body of primarily architects who review the design and siting, and their recommendations come to this table. And we're here to look at it, if we either approve or send it back for changes. So in case you're wondering what this process is, it seems a little out of normal for most building development, that's what this is. So, sorry, Mr. Muller, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the introduction. That's good. The district has received an upland siting design application for the property located at 2850 Lansdowne to permit the addition, to permit the construction of a single-family home, an accessory building, and various landscaping features. For context, the property is zoned R2. It's roughly 2,100 square meters and contained a primary residence constructed in 1957 and demolished in 2023. It's located on the north side of Lansdowne Road between Exeter Road and Norfolk. The applicant is proposing the construction of a roughly 5,800 square foot home, the accessory buildings, with an accessory building and various landscaping features such as a fenced garden. The application went to the ADP on December 11th, at which time they denied the application for recommendation for approval by council, requesting more details to the plans, most notably the landscaping plan. The applicant returned to the ADP on June 11th with revised plans, at which time the panel voted to recommend the application for approval by council. A review of the building plans and supporting materials was conducted by staff, and the proposed development is considered to adhere to the intent of the upland siting design guidelines. And the applicants, I believe, are in the audience. Yes, if there's any questions of staff. Or sorry, any questions of them. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muller. I'm happy to take any questions that council may have on this application. I don't see any. Councillor Watson, since you're the liaison to the ADP, do you want to move receipt of the report?
Yes, I will move receipt of the report for...
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed, unopposed? Councillor Watson?
Now I will move that council approve upland siting and design ADP 00168 for 2850 Lansdowne Road to construct a new single-family home, accessory building, and various landscaping features on the property located at 2850 Lansdowne Road.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion? I don't see any. Do you want to make a comment, or you?
I should add that the advisory design panel had asked the applicant to come back with a more complete application specific with respect to the landscaping detail, and the applicant did in fact do so and presented at the last meeting. So the panel was satisfied with that additional work and felt confident enough to move it forward to council with their recommendation to approve.
Thank you. I'm just going to make the comment because it's always interesting to see a different architectural design than we've seen. There's a lot of similarities in design that have come through. They're not identical, but this one really does stand out as a unique. And always nice to see that the intent of the Uplands is to have a variety of architectural styles and designs, and so it's nice to see one that stands out a little bit. And I look forward to seeing it built. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Moving on to item number 9.5 on the agenda, we have upland setting and design for 3475 Beach Drive. Is it not Mr. Muller? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Salish traffic? Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The district has received an application for an upland siting and design permit for the property located at 3475 Beach Drive to allow for the construction of a new single-family dwelling. This application follows on a previous approval that was granted in 2023, but which the applicants decided to amend subsequently. The numerous individual plan changes are all relatively minor in scale, but taken together, this redesign was deemed to be substantial enough that a new upland siting and design approval was warranted. The changes are enumerated in the report, which Council has received, but at a high level, they include the addition of some skylights and various changes to window and door designs, adjustments to the main building entrance, various landscaping changes, including the addition of a pergola, and revisions to the materials list. Finally, the basement of the house will now include a suite rough-in. The plans attached to the council report have the changes identified, and they are explained in greater detail in the applicant's letter, which is included as attachment 5 to that report. The overall building massing remains unchanged, and the opinion of staff is that the building remains a substantial and high quality design, which will contribute positively to the Uplands neighborhood in keeping with the Uplands design guidelines. A previous development variance permit for side setback relaxation and development permit for hazardous conditions related to a steep slope are unaffected by the amended design. I note that the advisory design panel reviewed the new application on the 11th of June and unanimously recommended approval of the application. To conclude then, staff find that the application is supportable and are recommending council approval of the application. We have the owner in the audience, and also Zach from Formworks Architecture is joining us online if council has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the applicant or to staff on this application? Appreciate the enumeration of the small changes that were made to this design to come back here, so that's helpful. Not seeing any questions. May I ask, go ahead, Councillor Watson, move receipt.
Yes, I will move receipt again for the upland setting and design permit ADP 00171.
Seconded.
3475 Beach Drive.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed?
And I will continue to the staff recommendation that the Uplands siting and design permit ADP 00171 to construct a new single-family home on the property located at 3475 Beach Drive be approved.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any other discussion before we move this forward? Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
I just one comment to staff. I'd like to thank staff for bringing this back to the panel for consideration. Because there were a lot of small changes, it might be hard to know when you've crossed a threshold where it does require additional review, but I appreciated the abundance of caution there, and it was, the panel clearly thought that the things that cumulatively were really only enhancements and things that you would come across as you were actually in the process of building the building. So I just wanted to express that appreciation to staff for actually taking that opportunity and not just guessing that it was it was under the radar sort of thing.
Thank you very much for that. Motion has been made for approval. Not seeing any other hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. And the last item on this section, which is 9.6, is a upland siting and design for 2980 Lansdowne Road. Back to Mr. Muller.
Thank you, Mayor. The district has received an upland siting and design application for the property located at 2980 Lansdowne to permit the changes to plans for construction of a single-family home and various landscaping features. For context, the subject property is zoned R2. It's roughly 2,100 square meters. It contains a primary residence constructed in 1954 and demolished in 2023. It's located on the north side of Lansdowne between Exeter and Norfolk. If council remembers this application, it was before them in December 2023, at which time they voted to approve the application. During the building permit phase, the applicant proposed to adjust their plans by replacing the aluminum gutters for hidden gutters, increasing the height of and floor area of the crawl space for the mechanical room, the addition of an exterior stairwell to access the mechanical room, and removal of hedges and installation of a retaining wall and fencing along the east property line. As these changes were considered significant enough to alter the form and character for the proposed plans, the applicant was required to return to the panel and council for their approval. The panel voted to approve the change plans at their June 11th meeting, providing recommendation for approval to council. A review of the building plans and supporting material was conducted by staff, and the proposed development is considered to adhere to the intent of the upland siting design guidelines. The applicant is in the meeting room, I believe, with us, if there's any questions of the staff, or if staff or the applicant.
Thank you very much for that. I'm looking to council if there's any questions for the applicant or to staff. Not seeing any. Can I have a motion to receive? Move to Councillor Watson, to their seconder.
I will.
Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Councillor Watson, would you wish to?
Yes, and I will move that council approve the upland siting design application ADP 00176 for minor changes to the building plans for 2980 Lansdowne Road.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Congratulations, I guess, to all of these applicants on these pieces. They've, I think in my mind, at least, and it appears in the mind of council, warrant support. So thank you for the thoughtful design. With that, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. We move on to section 10, bylaws and permits. And so we are 10.1 is a development variance permit for 3142 Woodburn Avenue. Mr. Muller.
Thank you, Mayor. The district has received an application for a development variance permit for the property located at 3142 Woodburn to reduce the second-story setback requirement to allow for the construction of an addition to the attached garage for the purpose of creating a secondary suite. For context, the property is zoned R4. It's roughly 1,130 square meters, containing a single-family home with an attached garage, and it's located on the west side of Woodburn between Lansdowne Road and Wessex Crescent. The applicant is proposing to construct a secondary suite of roughly 1,600 square feet. Single unit, and the secondary suite would be situated directly above and behind the existing garage. In order to accommodate the current proposed configuration of the secondary suite, where the exterior wall is flush with that of the garage below, creating one continuous building face from the first story up until the second story and until the roof line, the applicant would require a variance to relax the section 6.4411 of the zoning bylaw, which requires the interior side yard setback of the second story of the primary residence to be 3 meters. When constructed, this would take the form of like a tiered or stepped massing of the primary residence. The applicant are requesting a relaxation of the setback by 0.3 meters or 1 foot from the required 3 meters or 9.8 feet for a total of 2.7 meters or 8.8 feet. In general, the interior side yard setbacks are imposed to ensure adequate space between neighboring properties or uses or to reduce the appearance of overcrowding of buildings. They often do come at increased cost for construction and have implications for energy efficiency. The required notification was provided to all neighboring properties within 50-meter radius, and correspondence has been attached to the report for review by council. If council has any questions of the applicants, they are the homeowners and the applicants are in the audience today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muller. This is an item that's open for public input. It's gone out for notification to neighbors. We have one letter in support, the adjoining neighbor. Are there any questions from members of council to staff on the application? Don't see any questions popping up. I'm going to reach out to the community, either online or in person. Is anybody here to speak to item 10.1, which is the development variance permit at 3142 Woodburn? Yes? If it's the applicant, you don't have to come forward. This is just for anybody, any members of the public who wish to speak to the application. Oh, you're the applicant? Okay. I'll call you forward if there's any questions, but if we don't have any questions, we can probably deal with this fairly quickly. I don't see any questions or comments from the public, so we'll come back to this table. With no prior questions, perhaps we'll get to motions and we can go to a debate. Can I have a motion for receipt of the report?
So moved, Your Worship.
Moved and seconded for receipt. Moved. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Then we get to the meat of the matter. Councillor, somebody?
I will move the staff recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you. This is a motion is to approve the development variance permit. If this is to pass, is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this? I just want to make. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I was just going to comment that with our push towards energy efficient design, I do believe that this existing step back requirement is going to continue to be a bit problematic, and I hope that we can move towards at least a staff delegation on issues like this in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. I'm just going to speak, because sometimes we go through these fairly quickly. I really appreciate the fact that this is a thoughtful design and approach to adding space in this house, and appreciate even variances. Processes can be time consuming and difficult at times, but it is the process that we have available to us, and certainly really appreciate both the neighbor who has spoken in favor of it and is most affected, but also just the thoughtful approach taken to this, to add and maintain an existing house while adding additional living space. So wanted to say that because sometimes in our efforts to be expeditious, we just forget how long these processes take, and this is often a very meaningful moment for people who have gone through this process. So appreciate the time taken to get to this point. I'm not hearing anybody speaking in opposition. I'm going to assume this has got a good chance of passing. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. The variance is approved. We move now to the same process will follow for the next development variance permit for 1777 Hampshire Road, although quite a different variance request. Mr. McStravick.
Thank you, Your Worship. This next item is an application again for development variance permit, which the district has received for the property at 1777 Hampshire Road. The applicants request two variances in order to facilitate a two-lot panhandle subdivision of their land. The first request is to vary the minimum required lot frontage from 15.25 meters down to 4.5 meters. This is to allow for the relatively narrow driveway access strip typical of a panhandle subdivision. Secondly, the applicants request to vary the minimum required rear setback from 9 meters down to 6 meters. And this would be in order to allow the new subdivision line to be closer to the rear of the applicant's existing house, allowing them to retain that house in place while having enough lot area to create a new parcel at the back. As noted in the staff report, the applicant's arborist concludes that 4 bylaw protected trees and 1 non-bylaw protected tree would need to be removed in the course of the proposed development. However, Parks and Planning staff are of the opinion that through some revisions to the utility servicing design, it should be possible to avoid the loss of 3 of these protected trees if the present variance requests are granted. Staff would therefore work closely with the applicants through the subdivision process to ensure that as many protected trees as possible are retained. Overall, staff find that the application is supportable as the requested variances do not conflict with any district policies, and the addition of infill densification in this existing neighborhood will make a beneficial contribution to the community. And lastly, I'll note that the owners are in attendance tonight in case council has any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. McStravick. We don't get a lot of these panhandle lot subdivisions, so it's been a long time. Councillor Braithewaite.
Thanks so much, Mayor, and thanks, Mr. McStravick, for bringing up the trees, because I did read that with interest in the report that the 3 trees could be saved, and I'm hoping that the owners will agree that that would be the best outcome for those trees. My question would be around also in the report that it talked about them needing permits for the existing secondary suite that's in the house, and I'm just wondering if staff can fill me in on where that stands.
Mr. McStravick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the referral process, it came to light that a secondary suite was existing in the house, which we didn't have a record of permits for, likely meaning that it was built without permits, although a secondary suite is a permitted use in this zone. So as noted in the staff report, should the application be approved, then as a condition of subdivision approval, the approving officer would likely seek legalization of that suite through obtaining a building permit and building inspections to ensure building code compliance for life, health and safety matters.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, through you, Mayor. That was where I was going, was as long as that it was up to code. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Braithewaite. Any other questions for staff at this point? Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, through you to staff. And this is a question about the house that would be the existing dwelling that would be on Lot A if the subdivision goes through, there seems to be some reference, in, at least in the applicant's rationale for this, that they're hoping, I guess, that the house that they would be leaving if the lot's subdivided and they create a new home at the back would maintain, and we would have that character home on the street. And I wondered if there'd been any, first of all, if that house is on the heritage, is it listed on the heritage register at this point in time? And secondly, if not, could we at least be pursuing that if we think it has some significant value? I'm just wondering, you know, what benefit we would retain if there's no other planning tools and we approve the subdivision.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I don't think we can compel addition to the housing. Well, I guess, yeah, I'll Mr. McStravick on those two questions. As I was saying that, I realized that we've traditionally not added things to the register without the owner's request, but there's no legal protection that comes from that. It's just clearly just a message. So go ahead, Mr. McStravick.
Thank you. Through your worship, it's correct. The house is not currently on the Heritage Register. It is legally possible for council to add a house to the Heritage Register of its own volition, but I believe it's this council's policy to seek voluntary addition to the Heritage Register.
Watson?
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions of this. I have one question for the applicant here, really, and that's, so maybe if the applicant is here, you could come forward. And welcome.
Thank you.
Just a general question. So we've just undertaken a infill process in alignment with provincial requirements, and so we have the ability to add a secondary dwelling unit in the backyard. I'm curious if there's why looking at the a subdivision approach as opposed to just using the accessory dwelling unit model.
Mainly because we would rather not be landlords for a variety or several units.
That's a good enough answer.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the answer. Thank you. Any other? You might stay up here in case there's any other questions from members of council. I don't see any other hands. Oh, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. I would actually like to address the applicants directly and ask them if they would be at least interested in hearing more about getting listed on the Heritage Register with respect to the home that they currently live in.
Yeah, I would be interested in hearing more about it. I did read that it sounds like the municipality is restricting designated heritage homes from having more than 2 units. So that's quite restrictive. And if you want to save your heritage, why do that?
Perhaps we could get staff to speak to that, because that's not quite actually what is the case.
Well, maybe I'll just
And maybe I need to learn some more, so
Sure.
I'd be happy to hear.
I think it's probably outside the purview of our of this application, which is for a variance, which is the variance is to if we agree to the variance, and the subdivision process can go forward, which is a non-political process. But just for the interest of the community, the Heritage Register is really just a collection of stories of important or interesting buildings in the community. It doesn't apply any legal protection attached to the buildings, and nor does it change its allowable use. There's a heritage designation, which is a legal construct. It actually goes into bylaw, and that protects the house legally. It's generally done with agreement of the homeowner. It also provides some benefits in terms of some access to heritage grants and things for upkeep of those older buildings. So there's 2 separate pieces of there, just some general information, not necessarily to ask you to make a decision on that tonight. But go ahead.
Sorry, I jumped right to designation. So I'm registration. I get it. Okay.
Yeah. We do love the heritage registration because it captures a lot of these little family stories and histories of these houses that would otherwise be silent. And so, yeah, they're very valuable. With that, I'm going to, not seeing any of the questions. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton. And after this, I'll ask members of the public if they wish to address us. I do want to acknowledge we did receive one piece of correspondence as well in response to the variance ask. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, actually, this is a question for staff, not for the applicant, but I was interested to note in the staff report that it does clarify that there is no current policy regarding panhandle lots, which I think is interesting. That it was good to be reminded of that, because despite having seen some of them, or at least seen them crop up, I could have sworn that we did have some policy in that regard. So it was good to be reminded that we don't. I guess I don't want to get too far off the subject at hand, but would the new housing directives from the provincial government exert any influence over the creation of panhandle lots? Like, would council have any discretion as far as imposing restrictions on? And I'm not saying in this case I would, but is there a potential to specify that panhandle lots not be created, or would that be seen as standing in the way of creating additional housing units under the housing directives?
Interesting question. Can staff answer that question? Mr. Braithewaite.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. The small-scale multi-unit housing zoning changes that council recently undertook don't have any direct bearing or reference to panhandle subdivisions as such. As council will be aware, the recent zoning changes didn't change the minimum lot sizes for subdivision. And so as our zoning bylaw doesn't have a specific policy on panhandle subdivisions, it's sort of blind to them, and they're treated as any other subdivision. From that point of view, a panhandle subdivision, the SMOO implication is that it just allows 4 additional units possibly. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
I don't see other questions from members of the council, so I'm going to ask members of the public, because all development variance permits have the opportunity for members of the public to come speak to us. Please. So the process is the same as it was at the beginning of this evening. Have a seat, which is just you give your name, municipality of residence, and then you can speak. We're here speaking specifically to the DBP of on Hampshire Road.
My name is Patrick Weir. I'm a resident in Oak Bay, and in fact, my property is at 2425 Cranmore, which backs onto the property at 1777. And I have some general concerns and some specific concerns with respect to this application. The general concerns are, in my respectful view, the process for approving this is a flawed one, for the very reason that Councillor Appleton just pointed out. The district, as noted in Mr. McStravick's report, has 0 policies, 0 guidelines with respect to what's going to happen with panhandle lots. And what that means, as I understand it, is that this is the first panhandle lot application to be received, if not in all of Oak Bay, at least along the Hampshire Road area, where there's a number of these properties that are of similar dimensions. So in my respectful submission, it's important to get this right. It's important to make sure that this isn't done on an ad hoc basis. We're shooting from the hip, reducing variances, in this case, for example, the frontage from 15.25 to 4 point something, a significant variance, just to make sure we check a box with respect to the provincial plan. In my submission, what ought to be done is that those policies and guidelines ought to be put in place to start with, so that there is a plan and not just I don't want to say knee-jerk, but an ad hoc consideration of all of these proposals, because they will start to come forward. And of course, the precedent is going to be set with this one, so it's important to get it right. With respect to my specific concerns, we were initially told when the applicants came around that they were planning on building a smaller retirement home in the back. When we reviewed the materials that we received, it looks like it's going to be a 2-story home in the back, meaning that this lot that had originally been designed or set aside for 1 unit, 1 family unit, is now going to have 4, because there's 2 in the main building, 2 in the back, potentially. What that means, of course, is that the negligible street parking on Hampshire is going to disappear. There won't be any, I mean, it's crowded now. If you add 2 more suites back there, or 2 more units, that's going to disappear. So there are some concerns with respect to that, but most importantly, it's going to change the character of the neighborhood. As the applicant said in their proposal letter, what attracted them to that area was the walkability, of course, but the ambiance of the neighborhood. It's a neighborhood for families, 1 lot, 1 family, and that's what attracted to them to the neighborhood. That's what attracted us to the neighborhood as well. And there are 7 properties that abut onto this panhandle lot. So it's not just changes that are going to affect the applicant, it's changes that's going to affect 7 other families in that neighborhood that all back onto there. So if you're removing tree coverage, for example, that tree coverage is going to affect everybody. If there's noise, it's going to affect everybody on those 7 lots. And it's a little concerning that we're doing this just, again, on a ad hoc basis. And I note as well, and this was brought up by Mr. McStravick just a moment ago, that, and this is on page 4 of the application, that as a condition of subdivision approval, the approving officer is likely to require that the applicants apply for and obtain a building permit. I don't know what likely require means. I noticed Mr. McStravick used that same wording. You either require it or you don't require it. And likely requiring it leaves that discretion to somebody. And it sounds like it's completely up to the discretion of the approving officer. So that was just something that popped out. But on the plans that were attached to the package, there's no indication of the building footprint, where the building's planning on being. That's a little concerning. There's no indication as to where the parking areas will be. There's presumably going to be parking areas for the dwelling house as well. So without that sort of information, it's hard to make an informed decision as to whether or not this plan is supportable. Apparently those plans exist, but they weren't provided to the neighbors as far, well, at least to me. I don't know if they were provided to other neighbors. The tree issue, as I mentioned it a moment ago, is also concerning. The canopy, at least according to the report, sounds like it may have changed, was going to be reduced by 42% with respect to Lot A and 36% with respect to Lot B. And again, there's 7 properties that abut onto that. So that affects those 7 properties, their privacy, and so on. I also have some questions with, and I'm not an expert in this, but I have some questions with respect to construction, how that's going to occur. At least my house, my neighbor's house, the applicant's house, because it says so in the policy, were built in 1912. Foundations are of who knows how wide they are. We're concerned that if there's any blasting, big drilling, anything like that, it could have an effect. We simply don't know if that's been considered or not. If it has been considered, it's not in the report. So I would be curious as to what sort of mitigation efforts, if any, have been addressed so far. The community impact in my submission is not going to be negligible. If we're trying to check off 668 new housing units by 2028, this is not the kind of development that's going to move that needle. There are lots of areas, I'm not going to mention them, I'm happy to if anybody wants, that really invite densification. This sort of neighborhood is not one of those areas that invites densification. It's not a natural thing. It's not an organic type of process. And that's, I mean, you can see that by the virtue of the fact that we're looking at panhandle lots. This was never envisioned. So there are some very serious concerns that I, as a neighbor, have. I know at least one other, probably 2 other neighbors, at the very least, share those same concerns, or many of the same concerns. So those are some considerations that I just wish to put before council. Ultimately, if it's going to be approved, it's going to be approved, and we'll live with it. But I just wish that there had been a little bit more upfront consultation with the neighbors. The plans and guidelines and policies are in place to support this sort of thing, because it's, as your worship said right at the outset, these things come along only very, very rarely, but they're going to start coming along a lot more, especially if this one gets approved. So it's important to make sure we get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to just go back. You can go back to your seat. I'll try and pass a couple of your questions on to staff just so we can get some clarification. I think it's fair to say that, yeah, with no policies, there have been a number of panhandle lots. I know there's one over here in Victoria. There's a few of them around. So it's not the first one, but they're rare. In terms of, I don't think we can really talk about impact of construction that is ultimately managed through our noise bylaw, but I don't know if staff have any other comments on those sort of impacts with this. It's a little outside of the variance ask that we have in front of us today. There's nothing that would be different for this than would follow any other construction piece. Mr. Bull?
Thank you, Mayor. that kind of concern is more for down the road, although it could be considered at this point because this variance will create a potential for a subdivision. At this point, I don't think of information if this site would require blasting. Mr. McStravick, no?
Not that I'm aware of, but we haven't investigated that because it's not really, a building design consideration at this point.
Thank you. And the other question was just really around siting and design. I don't know where there's a variance and then a subdivision process. When the building application is asked for, does that go through any kind of siting and design? Is it considered part of a BP area or a development permit area, or is it essentially as long as it's compliant can go forward? Mr. McStravick?
Thank you, Your Worship. As this proposed Lot B has sufficient lot area to satisfy the zoning requirements, a rezoning is not required, and a subdivision in the established neighborhoods areas that does not require rezoning is not subject to the infill residential development permit area constraints. And on that note, with respect to the lot area of Lot B meeting the minimum lot size for subdivision, as I just mentioned, I should note that it was a little, maybe I misspoke in my report about our policies being completely silent with respect to panhandle subdivisions. I should note that there is a clause in our zoning bylaw which stipulates that for panhandle subdivisions, the lot area of the access strip is excluded from the lot area calculations. And so this proposed subdivision, even with that access strip removed, does indeed meet that minimum lot size. So just in that small way, I should have pointed out that our zoning bylaw does turn its mind to panhandle subdivisions with that constraint, and this lot does meet that constraint test.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Probably a wise policy, that one, actually. Okay, any other members of the public who wish to address council on this application?
Mayor, I think Maggie online would like to speak.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes. Okay, thanks, Councillor Braithewaite. Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Council, I have to fully 100% concur with the last speaker. My concerns are very much that there's been no consultation around the impacts on the neighbourhood, on the direct neighbours, all 7 of us, around any of the action at all. In fact, I've tried several times to reach the council, reach the planning office. All my calls have been ignored. I've actually been in there and also been ignored and not had my calls returned. So there feels to be very much that this is not a transparent process, and very much like the last speaker, I feel that the impact of this subdivision would severely change the quality of this neighbourhood. I live at 2449 Cranmore, just down the road from the last speaker. Whatever building is constructed would directly impact my properties and the 2 adjacent properties in terms of affecting what it was the term that somebody gave me, enjoying my property. That there will be an impact on the light that comes onto my property and the privacy that I currently enjoy. I'm sure that there are other, some of my neighbours feel the same way as well. My bigger concern, though, is actually the transparency or lack thereof of this entire process. And it feels to me that I know we've got this new municipal bylaw, etc., but there has been so many contortions to reach the sort of proposed subdivision. A 15+ metre variance, whatever it is massive. The 6 metre change or the 6 metre sort of setback at the back is huge. I'm not a planner, but I can see that there's been all sorts of contortions and to make this a viable proposition. But the one set of people that haven't been asked whether this is actually viable or not are the neighbours around us, around the property. It will severely change the way that I enjoy my property, and at least 2 of my neighbours do as well. It could actually, as I say, completely obliterate the light from my backyard and my neighbours' back gardens. I'm very disappointed that the trees may have to come down. I'd like some reassurances that if this variance goes ahead, then when we come to building permits, that there is much more transparency so that we have an understanding of what in fact is going to go on that lot. My understanding was it was a single-storey dwelling. It seems there's a suite in it, or there's room for a suite. There's going to be a basement for a suite. So there are going to be 4 families on there, which completely changes the tenor of everything around us. It's currently a very quiet neighbourhood with no parking, as the last speaker said. Anyway, that's pretty well all I want to say. The last speaker said it all. I'm just really reinforcing that there seems to be way too much happening that's too large in changes too quickly, that hasn't really been thought through, and certainly has done with very little thought to the neighbours surrounding the house.
Thank you. Maggie, can I ask, we didn't catch your name. I understand
Sure,
you're...
Maggie Lomas. I live at
Lomas,
2449 Cranmore.
Thank you, thank you. I might just for clarification in terms of the process here, we do have a development tracker, so you can look at some aspects of any development application online. Development variance permits, because they do require public input as part of that variance process, follow a prescribed requirement through the province's regulations of how we go about doing that. So this is always an odd one when there's a subdivision involved, because instead of a two-stage process, there's a subdivision process which looks at, basically it's a technical analysis of whether it can be subdivided. So in this case, as Mr. McStravitt pointed out, does it meet the minimum lot size requirements? Does it have access? Does it have other aspects that have to be met? In this case, because of the nature of the lot and the zoning there, requiring we have frontage requirements and setback requirements. In this case, it would require a variance to be allowed to go forward. So if the variance is granted, then it goes back to the technical analysis piece and assessment. So because of the variance process, it is a public process, but it follows a very specific process, which is why we're here today, to hear from the public. Following that, though, just for the record, there really isn't any other public input. That is a building permit process, a subdivision process. It can be tracked, but it is not subject to public input in terms of what's built there. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood those processes. They're different. And I just think it's probably worthwhile noting here, well, we think we have to consider any of these applications in the context of the new regulations and bylaws, which do allow for up to 4 units on any lot. That is, mandated by the province. So every lot now can have 4 units on it. So this one, subdivided or not, can have 4 units. That being, so I think what we're looking at here is not so much considering that as much as we are just, does this particular subdivision and variances, are they reasonable and reasonable enough to allow this to move forward through the more technical process? So I hope that helps a little bit. It's not being driven by the province or federal government, although of course it is informed by. And members of the public, please come forward. Same process, just name and municipality of residence. You don't have to give your address.
Solange Meyer, Oak Bay. I have a question. I just went through the Board of Variance met on Wednesday for a very similar situation. And I'm wondering if this application we're talking about went through the Board of Variance. And if not, why not? And how does that work?
Sure. There's two different processes allowed to go through. You can just turn off the microphone. We get feedback. Yes, this is always, we're having like a little education night tonight on land use process. There's two mechanisms you can go to ask for variances. Variances that go to the Board of Variance have to be minor, and it has to be based on hardship. And items that come, every other source of variance come to council. Applicants have a choice as to whether they go to the Board of Variance or they go to council. If they go to the Board of Variance, I believe they can still come to council if it doesn't get satisfaction there. I don't think you can go the other way, but I'm not 100% sure. But generally speaking, Board of Variances are minor in nature, and they adjudicate it based on whether there's hardship that demands the variance, where the council can look at a much broader context of variances. There's no legislative specification of how we adjudicate variances, interestingly. Hope that helps.
Who decides whether it's minor or not?
The Board of Variance decides whether it's minor
Whether
or
they'll
not.
take it on or not?
Yeah, they can. We've seen many Board of Variances applications that have been turned down because they don't consider it to be hardship or don't consider it to be minor. So, but the staff informs that process. Mr. Bull, perhaps you can explain how that process works.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We discussed that with the applicants, and we give them information about what is our the traditional hardship or hardship scope of issues that might be suitable for the Board of Variance. If that's not clearly the case, then this council table is a better option because there's more flexibility in this particular process, and then the applicant themselves need to make the decision as to where they want to submit the application to. Thank you, Mayor.
That's your question?
Does and it doesn't. At the Board of Variance in question, all neighbors were very opposed to the variance. The board still ruled that it should go ahead. Is there a recourse for the neighbors as we carry forward? Or do we rely on what was pretty well a gong show on Wednesday with a new board that hadn't met ever,
So
hadn't
I
met
don't,
for 18 months,
yeah,
whatever.
I don't want to spend time here on a proposal that none of us are aware of what happened at that particular table. But in general terms, variances once approved don't have a recourse, I don't believe, but Mr. Bull?
Yeah, thank you. That's correct. After a board decision, the only recourse is through the courts. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here who wishes to talk to us about, yeah, please come forward. Same process as before, just need your name and municipality of residence, and welcome. Sorry, microphone on first, push the button in the middle.
My name is Martin Wheeler. I'm Oak Bay. We live at 1778 St. Anne Street and directly abut the back variance of this property. I would like to support all the people that have spoken against the variance. We have, our house is set back 9 meters, I believe, because I measured it this evening. And then another one will be just 6 meters away rather than 9 meters. I would hope that anybody that lives in a single family home would go to the back of their back garden, which is 9 meters away, look out and envisage a 2-story home with 2 families in it. If you think that's acceptable and think that's just fine, then I think you should approve this. If, however, you may have some concerns or worries about it, then I think the variance cutting back by 33% from 9 meters to 6 meters is excessive. Other than that, I support all the other statements that have been made this evening.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public who wish to speak to us about this application? I'm going to call for a last time. All right, back to this table. I do have, actually, no, I don't think I have a follow-up question. Back to this table, if there go to any questions, and then we can move forward. I have Councillor Appleton and then Braithewaite.
Thank you, Worship. And maybe just, and I don't want to put staff on the spot here, but for the benefit of the folks who have come to comment on the item tonight, as we've pointed out, under the new provincial legislation, any residential lot in the district is permitted 4 units. So this lot is permitted 4 units, irrespective of whether or not we're talking about subdivision. But in the case of the rear yard setback, just to refresh council's memory and hopefully for the benefit of the public, if the proposed unit on the back side of this lot was in fact an ADU on the existing lot and not a separate unit on a separate subdivided lot, if this was an ADU, then what would be the rear lot setback for that ADU?
And for the benefit of the public, an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit, i.e. a standalone housing unit.
Yeah, thank you for the mayor. The setback for rear setback for accessory dwelling units at the back would be 1.5 meters, and the regular setback for principal buildings is 6 meters. Thank you.
Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship. So the reason I asked that question, the reason I put that out there for the benefit of the folks who are inquiring about that is that if in fact this was an accessory dwelling unit or additional dwelling unit being put onto the lot without the subdivision in place, it would not require a variance to be in the location that it's proposed to be here. So I recognize the concerns that are being raised, but I guess I want to keep the focus on the suitability of the subdivision in this case, and whether or not the proposed setback for the building on the proposed subdivided lot is out of line with what would be permissible under the provincial requirements and the regulations for infill housing that council has recently passed. So I'm just using that for context in that case. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Braithewaite.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I have a couple of questions. Number one, I think I heard you say that we're not aware of how many panhandle lots that we have in Oak Bay. Is that correct?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but does staff know, top of your head, how many panhandle lots exist in Oak Bay? I know of 4 off the top of my head, but I don't, that's just personal knowledge.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. There are panhandle lots around, definitely, but I don't know the numbers.
Not
Okay.
hundreds.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question was, I think I heard Mr. Rennick say, or sorry, not Mr. Rennick, Mr. Stravick say that the lot could be subdividable. If the lot is subdividable no matter what, is that correct?
Mr. McStravick, I think it does rely on us having variances first. Mr. McStravick?
Thank you, through your worship. Yeah, what I was trying to convey earlier is that they have sufficient lot area to achieve 2 lots without amending the zoning for minimum lot area, but the shape of the lot makes it impractical to achieve a subdivision without this variance or a similar variance. And if I could take a moment just to offer one point of clarification, I think something
Please
which might have got lost in my earlier description about the 6-meter rear setback variance. If council could turn to attachment 5, the plan of subdivision, and members of the public, I would just like to clarify that the 6-meter setback for the rear is actually proposed for lot A, so that the existing house can remain, and that reduced setback is between the 2 lots contemplated for this subdivision, rather than a setback for lot B facing towards the neighbors to the rear. I just wanted to make sure that's clear to everyone, because from the discussion it seemed like we might have gotten that wrong. Thank you. So it's an internal rear setback.
Thank you on that. And so then just to clarify then, how close to the lot line could that second building be? To the back lot line?
Mr. McStravick?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's hard to give an answer without using my calculator, because the rear setback is the greater of 7.62 meters or 25% of the lot depth. And I can't do that math off the top of my head to tell you whether it would be 7.62 or a greater figure. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And what about, and so I guess you can't really tell me about the side lot setback either.
The side setbacks, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. McStravick.
Thank you, through your worship. The side setbacks are not a function of lot depth or width. If I recall correctly, it would be 1.5 meters on either side as a minimum.
And a total of 3.5, I think, or something overall. A 3.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Councillor Braithewaite?
Thank you for that. And through you, Mayor. So we're talking here about having, two residences in the front lot and 2 residences in the back lot. But in actual fact, with the new legislation that has been pushed on us, there could actually be 4 residences in the front lot and 4 residences in the back lot. So even though we're just approving a subdivision right now for an additional building that could have 2 residences in it, it could actually have 4 based on what the province is allowing. I think that needs to be pretty clear to people that there could actually be 8 residences on these 2 lots, as with any lot in Oak Bay, correct?
Mr. McStravick?
Thank you, through your worship. Yes, that is correct. Both of the lots proposed through this subdivision would be eligible to contain up to 4 housing units. The information that we have received from the applicants is that that is not their plan to do that, but indeed that is the case for any future owners as well. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's perhaps what the worry is, through you, Mayor, that the future owner could then put, even if it's only built to 2 right now, a future owner could put 4 on there in the future. So, okay, I think that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithewaite. Councillor Watson?
Thank you, Mayor. And my question is also for staff, and it's more related to panhandle lots as an issue. Clearly, we don't know how many we have, but I'm kind of interested to know how many we might have if more of these applications came forward. And I'm going to have a very specific question. When our planning consultant did all that spatial analysis about the impacts of setbacks and height and lot widths as part of the revision to our major revision to our zoning bylaw just 2 weeks ago, was there any analysis of how many lots are large enough to be subdivided to create more lots? Because I am concerned about the issue of precedent that's been raised here and what the impact might be if people started doing exactly this same thing to take larger lots and create smaller ones that are still regulation size in order to achieve housing in this way.
Go ahead, Mr. Bull.
Yeah, thank you for the mayor. The question of lot sizes did come up because we had considered if we needed to change the lot sizes for the different zones. We didn't look at it in detail, but we did establish that most lots are not subdividable on the current zoning. So therefore, we didn't propose any changes to the minimum lot sizes. That said, there's of course properties like these that are subdividable at least on the basis of the lot area, notwithstanding other requirements, like this one doesn't tick all the boxes. So there is some potential, but it's not, as far as we could tell from our cursory analysis, not significant. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a follow-up, please. With respect to panhandle lots, I'm asking you as a planner, if you can, Mr. Bowl or Mr. McStravick, what are the issues around panhandle lots from respect to neighborhood livability, social arrangements, access? Can you comment on that from a planning perspective? Because it is an unusual form, and the fact that it's come up and it requires a variance suggests that it's not a typical form.
You just ask the easy questions, don't you, Councillor Watson? Yeah. Give council or staff a chance to talk to each other for a second here before they answer. Mr. Bull?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, we're just comparing some notes. There's a couple of aspects to this. On the one hand, longer lots, and this case, deeper lots, I should say. There's a lot of floor area, a lot area in there, and of course it's usually landscaping, but there's also sometimes larger houses on these kind of properties. So from a planning perspective, if you look at housing and housing supply, there's an opportunity there to do more with that land. And if the properties are dimensions in certain ways and the surrounding area is supports it in terms of sufficient setbacks, which of course is very specific and depends on the neighborhood and the community and what the level of acceptance is, then that offers an opportunity for more housing. What is our challenges is access. That's why panhandle, the handle on the lot needs to have provided access, so it creates another driveway, which is not ideal. It creates a relative long and more surface for driveways. That's a downside of panhandle lots. Those are kind of two things that come to mind. Does it cover your point?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I do, just cognizant of time and importance of getting to all the items on the agenda, I do want to move this item forward for discussion. So I may just seek that we receive the report that's in front of us here. Moved and seconded for receipt. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. But then we get to the matter of the actual development variance permit application. I will take either a motion for the recommendation or a motion to decline, but either one will engender conversation or debate about the merits of the application. Generally speaking, I prefer to have a motion that's written down. That's the staff recommendation, but I'll leave it to council as to which motion they wish to make at this time. Need someone to make a motion that isn't me. Councillor Appleton.
So, Your Worship, I will move that DVP 00153 to reduce the minimum required lot frontage and rear setback in the R5 zone for the property located at 1777 Hampshire Road be approved.
Okay, moved. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I think it's important, all of this conversation has been really, really valuable, and I appreciate the folks that have come to speak to us about it. It's important, in my view, as staff or as council will recognize, to consider this individual application on its own merits based on the information that we have in front of us and the current guidelines of the district. I think that the conversation has been useful from the perspective of identifying whether or not future subdivisions of this type are in keeping with the same type of, in keeping with the standards that we want to apply as part of our infill housing strategy and the application of the infill DPA. I think that there are some questions arising around that. And so I think that it may either from, I think either from my part or, my colleagues may also be interested in potentially bringing forward some notice of motion in the future to further explore this and to get staff feedback on what it would take to sort of evaluate that type of thing. I think that I'm willing to support this on its merits at this time because this is what we have available to us as far as standards, guidelines, and where we're at. But I think that there's been some important questions raised that we may want to explore further. In terms of what is in front of us right now, this is what we're considering, and that's why I'm making that decision. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Smart, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you. I do empathize with, and I appreciate residents coming out to speak and really be part of this valuable conversation as we move forward. I've had a lot subdivided near my place. I know what it's like to feel unsettled and just not know what your new neighborhood is going to be like. I now have amazing new neighbors and they're fantastic. Looking at these variances, I do feel like they're very reasonable. And I think that this is very in keeping with our OCP and the infill housing that we need, and we do need more housing for our residents, and this feels like a really great solution for the current resident.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Councillor Braithewaite next.
Thanks so much, Mayor. Yeah, I hear what my council colleagues are saying, but like the residents, I have a lot of concerns and worries. I think eventually that we will be moving forward on these panhandle lots in a good way. But for right now, I think that maybe we need to take a little bit more time to evaluate exactly the right steps that we should be taking around these panhandle lots. So I don't think I'm willing to support this at this time. But until we get some answers to the questions that have come up tonight, and then perhaps we can move forward once we have a better understanding. And I also think that it would have been nice to have a little bit more consultation with the neighbors around this as well, and give them more of the information that they were looking for, and perhaps they could have come out with a little bit more support. So I will be voting against this right now, but I'm sure that it'll come back in the future once we've had a few a little bit more input in regards to the panhandle lots. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are others wishing to speak? I don't. Oh, Councillor Green. Sorry, I was looking for the little digital hand, not the real hand. Go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, I meant to do that. I really appreciate the neighbors coming tonight and the applicants, and I appreciate all the input from our staff and the report itself. However, I think there was a missed opportunity here to actually consult with neighbors and work with neighbors on creating something that would be acceptable and something that they would see. There is no visual for the ultimate structure that will be built on this property. That would be really helpful, I think. And in most applications, we do get a visual or an architectural rendering or a designed home. In this case, that is not available. I think it would have been very helpful to have that for neighbors in particular. I also think consulting with neighbors after the fact never goes very well, and that's unfortunate because I think what we want to do, we want to see infill housing accepted, supported, and encouraged in Oak Bay. And I feel this process hasn't really achieved those goals. So unfortunately, I will not support the application as it stands. I would have preferred to defer it and give time for neighbors and the applicant to work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Watson.
Thank you. I am speaking, I actually don't know at this moment how I'm going to vote. And I just want to say that I'm very uncertain about the impact of this particular form. We've just gone through a lot of analysis looking at various housing forms of up to 4 units on all our single family residential neighborhoods in all 5 zones. this is anomalous because this kind of thing was not included in that analysis. So we have no sense at all of what we would need to be paying attention to. Because we looked at standard subdivision plating when we did that spatial analysis. So I'm a little uncomfortable with actually the idea of authorizing a situation that would now allow on both of these lots 4 units. When we really, we don't really know what the possible outcomes could be, and we haven't given it any thought. Again, I do appreciate Councillor Appleton's comments and the applicant's interests in moving forward and what their plans are, and that we do have certain things in front of us now and we could make a decision. But I'm not sure that I'm ready to make a decision, given that this is an anomaly of which there will be other anomalies in front of us in short order, I'm sure. So again, I don't know how I'm going to vote. That's not very helpful, but you'll find out when you call the question.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I don't always demand that people say how they're feeling. I like hearing the pros and cons. I think it helps everybody. Don't see any other hands to speak to this. So, Councillor Patterson, go ahead. We don't have any other public at this point. We're just coming to this table. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And it is a difficult decision at this point in time. I'm the one member of this council table, I think, that lives on a panhandle lot. And so I do have a bit more insight into how they work and how they function, and I do survive, and I love the neighborhood. So there you go. But when I look at this, and I do understand that the density could be higher than what is being proposed, and I recognize, I think from my perspective, that the applicants are also taking a leap of faith in this, because doing a subdivision of the lot and severing that front part also takes away some of the control for that, and a new owner could decide to purchase it and knock down the house, and then the heritage house wouldn't be protected. But it still leaves us with the actual lot area in question. And so when I look at this and in the context of what the housing targets are and what we're mandated to do, this is not an intensive, at least in my opinion, what is presented is not as intensive as it could potentially be, and the lot area size will accommodate both homes in not a terribly difficult way. Now, I realize that uncertainty is always difficult, and it would be nice to have the plans, although it's you get into the question of what comes first, the cart or the horse, because for an applicant to go through all of the design process without having the certainty of subdividing the lot also provides difficulty for them. So I will support the motion that is on the table. It's perhaps not an ideal situation. It would be nice to have all of the certainties known at this point in time, but I still think that it's a reasonable application, and so I will support the subdivision.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. So speaking to the ask here, which are variances, I think the pros and cons have been articulated pretty well by the members of the public, the applicant, and members of council. I do look at this a little bit more linearly, I suppose, in the sense that there are potential ramifications of approval of variances. That is true. But we are being asked, are the variances reasonable? And I guess this does require, I think, a little bit, as Councillor Patterson noted, a bit of a leap of faith here in terms of what the use will be. If left alone, it can have up to 4 units in some combination of accessory dwelling units or other. I do like the idea of having some ownership of the lots as opposed to having them all rentals. I think that has pros and cons, but they're both there. But if I look at the actual variances, just looking at the variances, the one of 4.5 meters as a frontage is just a requirement of any panhandle lot. There's no other option for that. It's an exceptionally large lot. There aren't very many lots that are twice as large as the legal minimum of a lot size and an existing house location that allows for the panhandle to be. So it's not opening the floodgates, but that 4.5 meters is just, any panhandle would require that kind of piece. And the fact that the second variance is the backyard setback of the existing home, I'm getting tagged for my time, but we close at 10, don't we, not 9? It's long days sometimes. You know, and I think that has to be weighed into it. Is that an unreasonable ask for an existing home? And I don't think it is. So the variances in and of themselves are, I think, reasonable. So then it comes down to really is the impact of the potential new home on the lot. Does it, with the changes allowed under this, which would frankly be a little, are different. They're not, they have equivalencies, but they're different. So just for the edification of people in the audience and the applicant, if we were to leave this lot alone and have it subdivided, or not subdivided, but used as an accessory dwelling unit and a primary building, the accessory dwelling unit would be set back much closer to the rear lot set line. So instead of 7.6 meters minimum, it would be 1.5 meters, but it would be constrained in height to 1.5 stories instead of 2. So what this, if we allow a subdivision, it allows a building that would be set considerably farther back from the rear lot set line, but would have a higher massing. So the net effective imagery of that would be probably a bit of a wash, but those are the cases. So I do recognize why people are struggling with this one. I think there's pros and cons on it. I do, in the balance of things, however, I think that the ask is not unreasonable. I think that the variances are understandable and reasonable for the asks that are being done on it. Unless I was to say that we just don't accept panhandle lots. And I don't think that's the right answer. I think that there are cases for it. I do want to say, though, that, and I'll just say this to the applicants, if this passes, there are ways of mitigating impacts on neighbors, and I'm hoping that if those designs are done, that they're done in a way that reduces overlooks and minimizes noise impacts on neighbors. It tends to work both directions because noise travels both directions. So at this point, at least, I'm comfortable supporting the application for the variances, but I certainly have heard the pros and cons pretty clearly from the other members of council. Anybody else wish to speak before I call the question? So the question in front of us, the motion is to approve the variances, which would, if approved, allow the subdivision process to continue with all of the technical aspects that have been laid out. So with that, I'll call the question. The motion is to approve. All those in favor? And those opposed? I have Councillor Green and Councillor Braithewaite opposed. That carries. So the variances have been approved. It does not finish this process, but it does allow the subdivision process to continue at a staff level. So with that, best of luck to you and to all the neighbors. Thank you for coming out, and thank you for the concerns raised. I hope we haven't been able to address them because that's not our job. We have to kind of weigh the balances of the pros and cons, but thank you. With that, we move to item 10.3, which is a parking stall patio application, license number 3002 at 2207 Oak Bay Avenue. Mr. Green is still not here. He's still on vacation, crazily enough, so we'll go to you, Mr. Bull.
Thank you, Mayor. This is for a patio stall application, and specifically for it's in front of council to deal with the fact that the patio will extend beyond the business frontage. And under our new program that was established last year, if the patio, if new patios or patios that are proposed to extend and become permanent, if they extend beyond the business frontage, council has a role to play. The report provides you with the backgrounds on that, the review. It is the existing patio from hide and seek that is proposed to be retained and continue into and become a permanent patio. There's a checklist at the back, attachment number 3, which goes over the criteria that have been reviewed by staff. And I'll leave it at that short introduction and see how much interest there is in additional information. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the ask is straightforward. The nuance and detail are maybe not quite so much so. The applicants are here. If there's questions of the applicant, then I think this would be a reasonable time to ask them. Are there any, this follows the same process as the last application pieces. There is a opportunity for staff or council to ask questions of staff or the applicant. Then the members of the public, we do have a number of pieces of correspondence that have been received. Then we'll come back, once public has had a chance to speak, we'll come back to the main motion. And we'll seek a motion from council, and then we'll debate that and have a vote. So up first is questions. Councillor Watson.
Yes, I have a questions. I think maybe I'll start with staff, and if they don't know, then we'll obviously switch to the applicant. But
would the applicant like to come forward now?
Yeah, that would be
Probably
helpful.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that way you're ready to go. Go ahead.
Yes, staff, there seemed to be some inference somewhere, or maybe it was me reading between the lines, that the actual patio as it sits right now was previously in a different location and then moved. Is that true, or has it always been exactly where it's sitting right now?
Mr. Bowl, you can defer that to the applicant if you wish.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, no, this has been the location all along and has been discussed at the time through, in consultation with the district staff at the time. Thank you.
A second question.
I'm going to just, for the record, can you just state your name, municipality of residence, answer the question verbally so people at home can hear your answer?
My name's Jamie Owens. I live in Esquimalt. And was that all you said to say? I own hide and seek.
Thank you. And the answer is yes.
Yes, it's been in that place the whole time.
And just for clarification, just so we're all on the same page here, the permanent siting of the thing is exactly the same as it is currently. Is that correct?
Yes, because if we moved it, it would take away parking space.
No, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Yes, and this is a question, it may not be the right staff, it might be engineering who would answer this question, but there's a painted line on the road now in bollards along that strip just on the back, off the back edge of the sidewalk. Does that relate to creating greater sidewalk width during COVID, and it's a remnant of that? Maybe Mr. Rennick can answer that question.
Mr. Rennick, did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mayor. The adaptive sidewalk that was installed during COVID-19, when it was installed, when Hide and Seek approached staff to construct their patio.
Sorry, Mr. Rennick, can you just speak a little bit louder? We're having a little bit of a hard time hearing you.
Yeah, let me get closer to my laptop. Is that better?
Yes, a little closer is a little better. Thank you.
Okay. The painted line on the road was an adaptive sidewalk that was installed for social distancing during the pandemic. All of the other social distancing sidewalks have been removed. That one was not removed. And the location of the patio in Hide and Seek it is where it is because there was an attempt to make sure that there would be one parking stall behind the patio. So engineering did work with the applicant on where exactly the patio should be under the COVID-19 guidelines.
Thank you, Mr. Rennick. That's helpful. And now I've got you there on the horn. I do have a follow-up question that you'll be able to answer. In terms of pedestrian and cafe patron safety and just general safety, is an alternate location of this patio closer to the corner, which would move it closer to Hampshire, and then move the parking space to the other side of it? Does that create any safety risks? And later on when we discuss this, I'll tell you why I'm asking that question. But I just wondered if there's another location that is closer to Hampshire that would still be safe from a traffic and pedestrian safety point of view and engineering.
Mr. Rennick?
Through you, Mayor, the first parking stall around the corner is safe enough for a vehicle to be parked in without fear of a vehicle being struck. So I would say that if there's adequate sight line for a vehicle to park there, there would be adequate sight line for the patio to be there.
Yes, if the applicant wishes to speak, go ahead.
Just for safety of person that hangs out on the avenue right there, that corner is very fastly taken, not stopped at. I, as a person who is the one providing the insurance would not feel comfortable with it there in terms of how people drive for safety.
Thanks.
Thank you. And then I have one final question for the applicant. When you originally constructed the patio, what was the rationale behind your choice of materials? Why did you pick that particular form and structure?
Go ahead.
So our design was bench seating because we have a cafe rather than a restaurant as opposed to the Penny. So people are there to casually sit, they have their dogs. So the bench was where we were coming at it, being like, this is the most amount of seating, especially during COVID where people can be socially distanced. And then in terms of materials, we're using cedar and like rocks. We're a West Coast city, so it seemed like a really good choice. Apparently people have feelings.
Thank you very much. That's all for now.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to staff. It does say in the report, object marker reflectors being installed on the patio. Just wondering if we can clarify the form of those. Are those just like little reflectors that you see on so many things? Or because aesthetics matter, it is Oak Bay Avenue, so I'm just wondering if we could elaborate on the appearance of those.
Mr. Rennick?
Through the mayor, an object marker is a standard road sign. They are a tall rectangle that have black diagonal stripes. I believe that there was a temporary one that had been provided to the applicant by Public Works. It was orange. It sat on a little base. I think the applicant told us that someone drove into it more than once, I believe. But yes, that is the standard for object marker. It could also be permanently affixed to the edge of the patio as opposed to being standalone.
Go ahead, Councillor
Yes.
Patterson. Sorry.
Thank you for that, Mayor. And that was exactly why I was asking the question, also because the marker that is there has been flattened a few times, I think, and so it seemed to me not the best functional way to have a marker on it, and I don't know if there are any alternates, but definitely that one doesn't. It seems to be more of a target than a reflector to warn people off. So I just offer that as a comment because aesthetics matter.
Thank you. More of a comment than a question at this point. So I have Councillor Patterson. Anybody else have? Councillor Smart, did you have? No? Questions? Okay, I have a question. This is really just to the applicant, and it's good to see the, I guess it's more of a comment. The two questions I had was really around the sort of the aesthetics and the sort of sense of space of that. In the guidelines, we generally have, this is going from a temporary, and temporary is temporary, going to a permanent installation. Just that, to my opinion, at least the highness sort of cuts off some of the visual openness and sort of public space aspect of it. So I'm just curious about both from an aesthetics perspective, just sort of the finishing materials, and the height perspective, if that's something, maybe just give some rationale for those two pieces.
So in terms of height, when we were thinking about bench seating, it was specifically about that our cafe is mostly frequented by everyone. So that includes elderly people, that includes families with young kids, that includes people with dogs, that includes toddlers that stand on benches. So the height is really there for the safety aspect, because I have tons of pictures of kids standing on a bench, and the only thing keeping them from toppling into traffic is that height. So that's something that, in terms of visuals, is actually really important and something that I feel quite strongly about. In terms of aesthetics, this was the temporary patio, and while I'm not going to remove the well-built by a local or construction guy structure, we've always planned on beautifying it but we would we don't have the funds that a lot of other businesses do to just put money in that would just get thrown away. So we were waiting for approval before any additional like plants or painting of the patio, because those things all cost money, and we are a tiny business.
Understood, for sure. There's nothing in here that's included that sort of shows those pieces, so it's sort of, okay. Thank you for that. Thank you. I think there was also an ask in here of waiving fees, and I don't think we're allowed to do that, but I might just ask staff on that one, because I don't think we're allowed to directly assist a business, and if it's in a bylaw, we can't modify that. Please, you go ahead.
The concern about this specifically, especially the amount of the fee, is kind of a pay-to-play feeling, because we're already paying for the application, we're already paying for the yearly fee, and to have a variance specifically for us, but also for everyone that is a small business, is coming at it. We were directed by Oak Bay staff to put it there. So to have a bylaw written post that happening that makes us pay an extra $1,500 seems like targeted. And I'm not saying, I wouldn't suggest that that's actually what happened, but it does seem like there are barriers put up that our lovely friends at the Penny Farthing wouldn't bat an eye at. I am not someone that owns 4 pubs. I own 2 tiny cafes. I have 8 staff. My payroll is everything that comes in and out. So it is
Appreciate
like
that comment.
the ethics of it, really,
So-
of putting in a $1,500 fee is ethically, I think, questionable.
Fair. I just, for the record here, I just want to make sure I'm clear. I think my understanding is fees that are within bylaws are not waivable by council. We can't just, by law, but Ms. Plouffe, I'm not sure if you're the right person to turn to on this one, or Mr. Bull. Mr. Bull?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We're looking into that further as well. And first off, the background to the fee was that when we created the program, we wanted to create this option that some patios might be wider and longer. It needed to go through council. The fee was simply based on an estimate of the cost, what it involves in district time, and to do the review, work with applicants, prepare a report, have the report reviewed, have this meeting here. And if you add it all up, that's unfortunately a very reasonable estimate of the cost. And we decided that through the new program that it would be a fee. Yeah, in follow-up, because the staff report had that option noted about maybe council could waive the fee, so we did follow up on that with legal advice to make sure what are the options here. But because the fee is set by bylaw, indeed, council should not be waiving fees. The proper way to deal with fees that are either too high or too low would be to change the bylaw itself, and that's the limitation. And the other reason that comes into play for that is that there is a specific ban on assisting businesses, and waiving a fee for a business would also be contrary to that particular ban. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to sort of recommend tonight we're going to look at the application and Ms. Plouffe, and I'll come over to Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just further on the assisting of business that is prohibited through the community charter, not our bylaw.
We can't do it for a specific business at all. We'd have to do it by bylaw change through that multiple process. Okay, thank you. Councillor Smart on the application.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, on this particular topic, would there not potentially be a case for grandfathering a pre-existing condition similarly to we would a building application? I guess when I saw this as an option, I did not conceive when we talked about that particular bylaw requirement of it applying to existing patios. I saw it more as new patio applications where a new patio would be built. And so I guess I see this as an unintended consequence of that bylaw that I did not foresee, meaning someone would have to come to council for something that really was approved already. So I just wondered if there's kind of like a grandfathering aspect of existing construction.
I think the short answer is no, but Mr. Bull?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, we had that discussion earlier, and the approach we took through the development of the patio program was that existing patios, which were all along were meant to be temporary, that they needed to be removed or go through the process to become a permanent patio, and that's how we set up the process. So there was not really, I don't think there was the intent to grandfather those to transition to permanent. So I think, yeah, that the answer on the question would be no. Thank you.
Thank you. The dividing line there is essentially if it's directly in front of the business, then it's essentially it's a non-political process at all. It just goes through an approval process of the staff with a minimal fee. But if it requires something beyond that, then it has to go through more because it impacts the broader community. That was the logic that we used at the time for coming up with the fees. In any case, I think what we're hearing is we can't waive it here tonight. So let's deal with the application as it stands, and we'll have to go through with that. Any other questions from members? I'll come back to you in just a moment. Let me just give a chance for council to ask questions. Are there any other questions that members of council have for the applicant or for staff on this application? Councillor Green? Oh.
Sorry, I was a bit slow. Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question through you. Just for clarity, is it my understanding that if all of this is approved tonight, that the owner has a plan to improve the aesthetics of the structure going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I'll give that question to you, and then you have an opportunity to ask a question as well.
Yes, it is the plan.
Councillor Green?
Thank you very much. That's all. Thank you.
Can I just ask, just to expand on that just ever so slightly? Can you just share with us, because the plans we have in here are essentially identical to what is there right now, and that's what's being asked for from an approval perspective. So
okay.
Some clarity would just be
helpful.
helpful.
The plan is to put in planters specifically with native pollinators, because we're quite passionate about native landscapes in our personal lives. So plants on either side that would also address the abutment issues in terms that are further down on the line. If you might ask questions about that, and then also paint the patio. And that's probably it, because I aesthetically might disagree with a lot of people.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor? I think that's it. Councillor Watson?
Yes, thank you. This would be a question for maybe it's staff, and it's an insurance question. Right now, I think I see that the business is open Monday to Friday 9 to 3 and Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 4, but there's no restraints on accessing that patio space at any time of the day or night. So who is responsible for that space, that licensed patio during non-business hours?
This is a universal question for all patios in the district on public land. Mr. Bull?
Yeah, thank you. There are provisions in the bylaw for insurance, so there's an insurance requirement for the business. But I think the reality is that both the business owner and the district carry a responsibility there, right? The district continues to own the road. The business owner has the patio located on it. But this one particularly is quite accessible outside of regular hours. At this point so far, I'm not aware of any issues that it has caused. But if you ask about responsibility, that's probably where it lies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff. I just wanted to know, is this council review fee of $1,500 a one-time thing, or something that would have to be looked at again on a yearly basis? I'm just trying to think ahead to if the applicant is able to fundraise for this somehow. Is it just a one-time thing?
Mr. Bull?
Thank you, Mayor. For you, Mayor, a one-time fee for today's decision. And then for the patio itself, as long as it continues to operate, there's a yearly renewal of a licensing fee based on area. So that's another cost that occurs yearly. Thank you.
Square footage, lease fee, essentially. Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Smart?
Yeah, I guess one follow-up question through you, Mayor, to staff. We received, 100 letters in support of this application, and this is a public space in the community that, as Councillor Watson points out, people even use outside of hours. And I guess I'm just looking for solutions to not potentially lose this space in the communities. But I gather even if we were to amend a bylaw at this point, it would be after the fact, so it wouldn't really, there isn't really any clear option here to support this resident.
I think we don't have a lot of good options on that on that fund. But again, the primary ask that we have in front of us today is the ask is council supportive of the siting of the patio as proposed here today, the size of it, the siting of it, and I guess subject to some change, roughly the aesthetics of it as it stands right now in terms of its height and makeup. So that's here. I'm happy to start this with not seeing any other questions or anything else. We have correspondence. Is there anybody else from the public who wishes to talk to council about this? Yeah, please come forward. You probably heard the process. Just name and municipality of residence.
Carl Corio Martin, South Oak Bay. I say Oak Bay. I'm a customer of Hide and Seek. I use it year round. It's fantastic public space. I want to just sort of emphasize that I think outdoor eating and outdoor seating is the heart and soul of Oak Bay. And we really should do everything we can to encourage and support small businesses providing that amenity. I think that a lot of the design criteria are driven by its proximity to the traffic. And I'm a little bit concerned that we're asking the private business to add engineering controls to provide safe conditions for members of the public. And I would instead ask that we direct staff to provide engineering controls to make Oak Bay and Hampshire safer. That crossing is terrible. And we can do things to lower the speed of traffic, which will make a much more pleasant environment for all of the outdoor seating there, and minimize that need for that high wall to isolate the people enjoying their beverages and talking with their friends in a well-ventilated space, much safer. Yeah, so anyway, I just really want to say, it's awesome. I love Hide and Seek. I love that we have outdoor seating. I want more of it, and I want us to do everything we can to facilitate small businesses creating that kind of space and environment. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Corio Martins. Any other members of the public who wish to talk to us about this, either online or in person? All right, come back to this table then.
Move receipt.
Before I get, we have a motion to move receipt. We'll do that, and then we'll come back. You can come back up and ask the question. So we have a motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed? That's just a procedural piece that we get the report on the record. Go ahead, please.
It is, sorry, I'm overwhelmed a little bit. I'm a crier, I'm sorry. But can you explain, is staff doing any of these things outside their working hours? In fact, that I need to pay them their hourly wage that I already pay in their taxes? That's a legitimate question. And then also my question is for council. Did you not discuss the ramifications of what you were doing when you made that bylaw? Because there's real people's lives. And I feel like most of this stuff in regard to the patio, in regard to most of the COVID stuff, seemed pretty flippant. I'm coming at this with a $500 application fee after a $500 non-refundable deposit being met with a $700 yearly fee, and then surprise, within 2 weeks of this meeting, I need $1,500. It screams bureaucracy and barriers that don't support small businesses, and we're probably one of the few, along with our neighbors who support the patio, that are actually locally owned and actually small. Starbucks is allowed to have a patio on their public space, and they contribute nothing to this economy. They don't pay the tax that they're taxes.
I think we're getting away from a question that you asked
But the problem is that I was told I'm just coming here about the fee. I wasn't told I was coming here about, I said I could not come and waste my time, because my time matters, if I wasn't going to talk about the fee that you all chose to place on us.
Thank you, and we have heard you on that. I just wanted to share there are things that we can and can't do in this meeting here tonight. So we have a piece of us in front of us for either to recommend the extension for the parking stall installation.
I'll move the recommendation.
So we have a mover, moved and seconded. Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Smart and then Watson.
I'd like to move an amendment and to have staff come back with options to support small businesses to prevent the possible loss of this patio space.
I have to roll that out of order. We're here to discuss whether or not the siting and of this is available, and that's just not possible. We can have a motion arising as something if that's the desire after the fact. So we have a motion, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. I am so pro patio, and I love the fact that we got, I counted the pages, 74 pages of correspondence from the community supporting hide and seek because of the vibrancy that the cafe, the community life it engenders by being there in the village and creating this additional space where their patrons can gather. And I really would like to see a patio to continue to be there. But I have some serious reservations about the patio as it's currently designed and sited. And I'd just like to speak to those so you can hear what my concerns are. Just first off, one of the things that it does have to meet is that we developed as part of this patio review program some general design guidelines. And the very first one is that the patio is to complement the form and character of the associated frontages in the surrounding area. And while, you know, there's no, I wouldn't say uniformity to the village right now, there are some significant buildings, and hide and seek itself sits inside the historic building, the Bell Block. And I generally do not think that the patio as it's designed, using cedar slats, in relation to this beautiful building, the Bell Block, is actually in keeping with the kind of look and feel that we should be encouraging in our village. And I realize that there are other merchants who have more resources and more turnover and bigger businesses, and that gives them opportunity to do things differently. But I don't think we should lose sight of that when we are considering patios, because we are trying to create a vibrant community that attracts people, and I'm not sure that the patio as it's configured right now does that. I also have some concerns about where it's sited, and how it creates a welcoming and opening sense to the community. It's very cut off from the street and the sidewalks. And although I understand what the owner had to say about the height of the barrier for safety of children, it also makes it not really very permeable in the way that if you look across the street to the more generously, you know, an expensive example does. We can see what's going on inside the patio at the Penny Farthing, and we can't really see what's going on in the patio at hide and seek right now. And I think that could be improved upon to everybody's benefit, to make it more transparent. I did ask Mr. Rennick if it could be moved, because I think siting it in more contiguous to the corner and then moving all the parking to the other side of it creates a more consistent space with outlook into the village, both to Hampshire and into the wider area. So I know that's not what's being presented to us, but I think that once I heard from Mr. Rennick that would be just as safe as where it is right now, that is worthy of considering. In discussing the patio with a member of the public who was walking by when I went to take a look at it, they did reflect that it's rather the poor cousin on the block. And I do understand the economics of having a small cafe, but our job is we are giving permits for the use of these patios in the public right-of-way. It is not a right, it's an opportunity that has to have benefits, I think, quite broadly, and not just for the business. I guess, yes, we are trying to encourage and support business in the community, but we are also trying to make a vibrant and attractive village. And then I guess finally, I would say that even with respect to the design of it right now, it's not that comfortable to sit in I know people do it, but you know, if I was looking for comfort, I'm not quite sure it's there, and I think there could be some enhancements to that. So overall, I just don't think that the proposal as presented is quite of the quality that we should be looking, the quality or character that we should be looking for as an acceptable permanent fixture in our village, because that's really what's happening here. We're looking at an application and saying, yeah, this is okay for as long as you want it to be there. And I'm not sure that it is right now. I would be happy to see a resubmission that addressed some of those things, but I do not want to support this proposal as it's presented to us tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. You raise a point that I'm just going to throw over to staff in terms of process. I think everybody I've heard around the table here is supportive of having patio space there. So the question is really, you know, the specifics at this point more than anything else. So I guess the question is, if council, to Councillor Watson's point, feel it's not quite where it needs to be right now, does council have the authority to extend for, say, another year the current scenario and allow the applicant time to, both financially and perhaps take a bit more time from an aesthetics perspective, come back with a revised design? Just thinking if there's other mechanisms here by which we can extend the current temporary use, or is that again written in bylaw to the end of this year or something like that, that they can only exist? Mr. Bull?
Yeah, the extensions previously for the existing patios was by council motion, so the bylaw is silent on that. So itself, that looks like that could be an option. That said, there are other businesses going through the similar processes, so that probably should be considered. I think otherwise, the council could also respond to the current application in front of you, perhaps have commentary about the current design in relation to this approval, and that way ask the applicant to have another look at it. So that's another option. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to get understanding what the options are in front of council here this evening. Are there any other, did I see a hand online that was wishing to speak? Nope, okay. I'm sorry, to the applicant. I have to just, sorry.
Point of order.
Yeah, okay, so nobody at home can hear, and we're in the process now at this point, so. So I for the, fair, so there was a comment made at the table that in the last thing that was just, I think, trying to be sympathetic to the application, that recognizing that not everybody has the same deep pockets to undertake more very thorough and detailed, design and remediation work. I did not take it as being in any way hurtful, but the applicant is here expressing that they did find it so, and so just so the applicant understands. I did not hear that was the intent. I think we're just trying to recognize that there are costs here, and we don't want to impose unnecessary cost or difficulty onto any applicant. So with that, I don't see any other hands online. Councillor Smart for a second time.
Oh, thanks. I will speak in favor of option one being the only best option we have right now. I think this is an asset to the community, and we've heard from many members of the community how important it is to keep this space. I think it is a different aesthetic. I appreciate the eclecticness of different aesthetics. It's a contemporary, simple form. It's beloved by so many members of the community. And we've heard the applicant speak to, should funds become available, desires to do more with it when that is possible. I wish we were a municipality that was, supporting parklets and sidewalk patios rather than lumping on continuous fees and making things unfeasible. So I'll be supporting option 1.
Excuse me, point of order.
Go ahead, Councillor Green.
We have a very active BIA. We have liaisons that serve the BIA. I think Oak Bay has a great reputation when it comes to dealing and working with small businesses. So I think that's
point of order is just that the comments made were, I don't think it's really a point of order, but I think your point is made. Thank you, Councillor Green. We have here a motion in front of us to approve as it stands. I'll perhaps speak here. I hear Councillor Watson's point here. My general feeling of this, looking at it, was that I'm supportive of the square footage. I'm supportive of the location. I'm supportive of providing this. If there was a way for us to make this, a simpler process, I would love to find it. I think that's why we did delegate the sort of the frontage in front of buildings, in front of businesses to be as simple as possible. So I guess this is boiling down to me whether or not, as a temporary or another year extension, I would be fine with this. I am struggling a bit with it as a permanent design. I'll say that is ultimately the choice that we have to make here. I certainly don't want to see it closed, but I also just think that at the end of the day, is the design suitable for that siting, and does it meet the expectations of being an open? I mean, the intention here and why we've been so supportive of these items is to make our business community more open and inviting, have a feel of connection to people as part of the businesses on the streets, and so high walls and so forth don't necessarily do that. So that being said, I'm struggling a little bit with the recommendation of approving it, but I also recognize that we have an application here that is what it is, and we have to adjudicate it based on the merits of this application. And so I think I certainly don't want to see it not move forward. I guess the question here is whether we ask for additional changes before we do the permanent approvals. But we have a motion on the floor right now to approve it as it stands. Is there any other discussion at this point? Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will speak in favor of the motion that's on the floor to proceed forward with the staff recommendation as the best option that's in front of us. There's been some important points made tonight about the ways that council can support small business. I'm glad to have clarified, although the outcome is not what I would love to see a different option other than what we are legislatively required to do as far as waiving the fees, and that's a huge challenge. I guess I will just leave it at this. I think is hopefully the best way forward. That we have a great degree of value and appreciation for our small businesses. And Ms. Owens, we appreciate you coming and speaking to us tonight. We really do. And we value you taking your time to help explain your context to us. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Green?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I really appreciate how difficult this is. It's a difficult issue because of a number of comments. I also really appreciate Councillor Watson's honesty about how she's approaching this issue. But I want to make a very important statement about Oak Bay's reputation as a municipality and staff in terms of small business. Since I have lived here since 2010, and I've been a BIA liaison, etc., and worked with all of the small businesses on the avenue, our staff have been remarkable in trying to find solutions, in trying to find ways forward. And I remember COVID very well, I think we all do, when patio areas were a new thing, and we put them on the avenue. We worked hard with our business owners. So I don't want the impression left tonight that we don't support small businesses, because I don't know of any other community that does more in terms of supporting small businesses. And so I want to set the record straight on that point. And I also appreciate that for very small businesses, fees and so on can be difficult, but everyone faces the same issue, whether they're a small business or a big business. And the one thing about this is that we try very hard to be even-handed and fair, but it is legislation. It is not something that we determine at this table at the moment. And so that doesn't mean that we're not sympathetic. I'm sure we are. But I think we all that's the work that we do. It's about regulation, and it's about bylaw enforcement, and it's about managing these kinds of issues in a fair and even-handed way. So that's what I'd like to say. As far as my vote on this issue, I'm like Councillor Watson was a little while ago. I'm not quite sure what I will do, but I appreciate everyone's comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. And I have Councillor Braithewaite. I think I can probably get to the question. Go ahead, Councillor Braithewaite.
Thanks so much, Mayor. Yeah, I think Councillor Green said it very well. So I'm not going to repeat what she said. So I'll just say ditto for the comments that she made. And I do appreciate Councillor Watson coming forward with her remarks around the aesthetics of the patio as well. But I also hear what Councillor Smart said about how, you know, sometimes it's nice to have something a little bit different. So it is a very tough choice, and I'm still struggling. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Braithewaite. Not seeing any other comments here. I think I'm ready to call the question. The application is in front of us for approval at this point, so I'm going to, that's the motion on the floor, is to approve it as it stands with minor improvements to there are changes to the plantings and so forth, but otherwise intact in the same core configuration. So with that, all clear. All those in favor of the application? And any opposed? I have Councillor Watson and Councillor Patterson, and that's it, opposed. So that carries. The application is carried. So we're good to go. Thank you very much, everyone. And Ms. Owens, I think, has left, but if she's still in that thing, I would like to express, as Councillor Appleton did, our appreciation for her coming in tonight, and I know these are often very difficult pieces. So with that, but in this case, her application has been approved. 10.4, zoning amendment, 1703 Monterey. Oops. Oh, you're going to sorry, you have to recuse. Okay, you're in the notification area.
Yes, Mayor, I must recuse from this now as a non-pecuniary interest in it. I'm in the boundary notice area.
Okay, thank you. Now that Councillor Patterson has left the room, we have 1703 Monterey Avenue. Mr. Green, Mr. Bull, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is followed up on previous discussions with Council. A couple of changes have been made in the area where the public safety building and the firefighters park is located. Lot consolidation has been taking place, and as part of that, this is addressing a zoning leftover, so to say. Following the consolidation, there is technically a strip of land of St. Anne Street that is still residential zoned, but it's now it was already part of the bigger portion of the lands, but it needs to have the same zoning, and this zoning bylaw makes sure that the zoning is applied to all of these lands. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members of from staff? Or sorry, from council to staff on this item? Apparently it's late for me too. It is open to the public, so if anybody here wishes to speak to us to this accumulation of land and rezoning, this is the opportunity. It's the 1703 Monterey Avenue. This is the land that was individual parcels of the parking lot at the fire hall, if anybody's wondering what this is. Not seeing anybody online or here wishes to speak to it, so I'll come back to this table. Perhaps a motion to receive, and then we can have...
Move receipt, Your Worship.
Moved and seconded. Is there a seconder? Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed, unopposed? And we need, actually, I should have probably done this in the other order, but can we have first and second reading, please?
Your Worship, can I make make the motion that council give first and second reading to zoning bylaw amendment bylaw number 4869 2024 for the property located at 1703 Monterey Avenue?
Yes, moved. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I am going to call again for public input. I just think it's best practice to do that after second reading in case there's any additional information that council needs to hear. Not seeing any, I'll come back to this table. Seeing no discussion at this table, no hands raised, I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed, none opposed? Can you give third reading?
Yeah, Your Worship, I would move that council give third reading to zoning bylaw amendment bylaw number 4869, 2024 for the property located at 1703 Monterey Avenue.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. There's a debate on third reading. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Do the same for adoption, Councillor. We're allowed to do all four in one evening. I know it's strange under the new rules. We are. New provincial rules. We get to.
Okay. All right. Your Worship, I would move the council adopt zoning bylaw amendment bylaw number 4869, 2024.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries. Brave New World. No wait between the two. 10.5, which is repeal of Heritage Revitalization Agreement, bylaw number 4704. Can you just get in, Councillor Patterson? Mr. Bull, are you going to provide a brief introduction?
Thank you, Mayor. This report deals with a property at 960 Foul Bay Road. On this property, a couple of years ago, Council did review and adopt and approve an Heritage Revitalization Agreement. At the time, the proposal was to move the existing house and create new housing around it. That particular plan was worked on but abandoned at some point, and also the subdivision never proceeded. That means that Heritage Revitalization Agreement and the accompanying Heritage Designation bylaw for the building were no longer, even though they're in place, under the terms of the agreement between the district and the owners, that agreement became defunct because it was not completed as agreed to. So following up on that, even though there have been regular conversations about future projects for this site, the applicant has now requested, or the current owners have requested, for that Heritage Revitalization Agreement bylaw to be repealed, and similarly the Heritage Designation as well. And it's a bit of an administrative matter, but that's the context of this particular file. And I'm not sure if we have people in the room for this. Yes, there is somebody in the room for this to speak for that to that if necessary. Thank you.
Sounds good. I'm happy to go through a similar process as last time, but given how few people I think are here to speak to this one, did you wish to speak to the applicant to this process, or just answer questions? That's the answer to questions. Okay, so what I'll do then is I will go through our sort of process on this, which is a bit different. Again, we're under a different sort of world here in terms of how this works. I'm going to go through it this way. I'm going to ask, do these individually. I'm going to ask for any public input on everything at the beginning, and then I'll go through first, second reading, etc. So before we go do that, though, I'm going to just have a motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. Thank you. I'll call the question on that. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. And then we move to, I'm going to ask for public input. If there's any public input, we'll take it. Not seeing any, not expecting any. So what I'm going to do is do first and second reading, and then we'll take, if there's any questions of the applicant or staff, we can certainly do it at that time. This is given that we're at bylaw phase, we might as well just do it through this process. So we can have first and second reading read aloud.
Your Worship, I would move that Heritage Revitalization Agreement bylaw number 4704, repeal bylaw number 4874, 2024 be read a first and second time.
Thank you. There's a seconder. Thank you. So questions or discussion on this? Don't see any. Not expecting any. I don't think there's need any further piece of this. Is a procedural piece, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. And then we move to, if we can get read a third time.
Your Worship, I would move that Heritage Revitalization Agreement bylaw number 4704, repeal bylaw number 4874, 2024 be read a third time.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. And then we go to a different designation bylaw repeals. Can you read those ones aloud?
Your Worship, I would move that Heritage Designation bylaw number 4703, repeal bylaw number 4875, 2024 be read a first and second time.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion, debate, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed.
Your Worship, I would move that Heritage Designation bylaw number 4703, repeal bylaw number 4875, 2024 be read a third time.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Adoption comes back at the next meeting. We don't typically debate it, so I wouldn't suggest you have to sit through a meeting to wait for that. You can probably watch it online. Yeah, thank you. And then we have, last item on the agenda here is 11.1, which is a letter from the Office, the Minister of Housing on our housing target progress.
So condescending.
I'm not, Ms. Plouffe or Ms. Williams, do you wish to introduce this, or? I'll do a brief introduction. Basically, this is, as I think council's aware, but perhaps the public isn't, as part of the housing targets, we were required to present a 6-month update report, which we did. We submitted that, and then the ministry has sent back a letter suggesting that we are behind, which we already acknowledged in our letter to them. But this, because it's a part of a formal communication from a higher level of government, it's really here just in the public realm for us to receive. There may be something the council wishes to do with it, but I think at this point I'll leave that to council if there's any direction you wish to give. But primarily here, we're just looking for a motion to receive. If there's any questions that council have of staff, or Mr. Bowles here that could answer them if necessary. Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. Through your right to staff, could staff just remind us when the next reporting period is? And I know that staff's working really hard on coming back to council with more information. I just wondered, is that likely happening in September with regards to next steps on our infill housing? If you could just remind us of sort of what the dates are, sort of moving forward with progress.
Mr. Bull.
Yeah, thank you, through the mayor. The next housing target update is due end of September, so that will be reported on in October in terms of infill housing next steps. We do have a report on the preparation for either this month or September to preview on the next steps. And but that is still under review, but not specific, I think, to the housing targets, though. Thank you.
Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor, just to follow up to Director Bull, will there potentially be an opportunity then to move forward some decision making on council that we'll be able to report new progress back to the province in advance of our next report?
Mr. Bull. It's kind of a yes or no question, I think. Do you wish to repeat the question?
Or please clarify or repeat. It might be the warmth.
Councillor Smart.
Yeah, the question was when we receive that next report and next information to council about infill housing in advance of the next housing target report, will there be an opportunity for council to make further decision making and progress on infill housing that we can then report back to the province on additional progress before we provide updated numbers again?
So, Mr. Mayor, yeah, that it depends a bit. So we need to do that additional work that we intended to do during the summer. Now that we know the details of the housing program for infill that we have created, there are some different. It's a little bit different than we anticipated 6 months ago. So we are working with the consultant to update the scope and start, and that work is underway. I'm not entirely sure if we are able to wrap up enough work to get back to you in September, because that would need to be the deadline, right? We would need to get back to you if whatever we propose and have it approved by yourselves by the end of September. That is pretty fast, given that there is after this month only the few meetings in September. So I'm not entirely sure, but we're working towards September, October to get these other changes for infill housing back in front of you. And then depending on how the process goes at that point, it might be this reporting period, it might also be the next one, which is going to be 1 year from September this year. So September 30th next year is the next reporting deadline. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate we're almost done here, but I do need a motion to extend, say, by 5 minutes this meeting so we can wrap this all up. So moved and seconded. Thank you. I'm going to call the question for. Yeah. All those in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed? Councillor Braithewaite.
Thank you, Mayor. In the letter, the last paragraph says, going forward, I trust all efforts will be made to create the necessary conditions to support the delivery of more housing and meet housing targets. And I just wonder what more we are expected to do, because we've changed all of our bylaws. We're going along to do the things that the province has asked us to do. We have no control over how many people build what. So how do we say to the province, look, we've done the things that we were supposed to do. Nobody is wanting to build, if that's what happens, that nobody is wanting to come and build in the way that the province had an expectation that they would. And then where does that leave us as a municipality? If in 6 months we still haven't met the target that they have set for us at that time, even though we followed all of the instructions that they have given us, what recourse do they have on us, and what can we do in defense for ourselves, I guess, is my question.
I think some of that was a bit rhetorical, but the last part I think was answerable. Do we know, I mean, I think they've been a little vague in terms of what the carrot and stick is that they wield, but Mr. Bull, can you maybe share with us what they've said to date?
Thank you. Let me see. We are completing the infill housing program, so there's a couple of other bylaws we changed, so make sure that the program works well, is going to work well, at least as far as we can tell up front. The second part is that the province has also outlined how we need to update our housing needs report this year, update our OCP and zoning bylaw next year, so there's other work coming next year. So we're going to do more on that front to plan and allow for 20-year housing needs. In terms of the target reporting and whether we achieve the target or not, the province does have some tools to follow up. First step is reviewing what we did, if our efforts were sufficient, all the way to joining us or to either give specific direction to change certain things, all the way to specifying what our bylaws would say. But that's all pretty theoretical, because we've made sure with the current program that we're squarely within the guidance that the province has given us. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Anything else, Councillor Braithewaite? Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. Before I go to second time speakers, I will, Councillor Green and then Councillor Smart. Just cognizant of time here, but go ahead.
I will go very quickly. As you know, I've been very concerned about the negative narrative and rhetoric that has been played out in the media about Oak Bay and its housing situation. I think we have to be really careful about how we frame housing here. And I feel a lot of it has been unfair. I've had many residents approach me about it. So I'm hoping that all of us take the responsibility to reframe some of the discussion around housing in Oak Bay and look at all of the positive things that this community offers to all of us. And I'm hoping that will also be part of the narrative of our community. So that's just my 2 cents on this, but it is bothering people. It certainly bothered me. Thank you.
Councillor Green, since we're into our commentary, would you want to make a motion to receive the letter so we have it on the table?
I'll so move.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Councillor Smart?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Director Bull. I just wondered if there were definitely items that came up during the bylaw revision process that there wasn't time to deal with before, because the bylaw needed to be wrapped up by a certain date, but the sense was that the work would continue. And I guess I'm particularly thinking about townhouses, driveway accesses, corner lots, laneway suites, and other just aspects of refining the work has been alluded to. And so I guess my question is, are those some of the things that are happening over the summer and in September, or is that envisioned for later? Thank you.
Mr. Bull?
Thank you, Mayor. The townhouse one sounds more like a topic for next year, because but driveways and corner lots, particularly driveways, and some other bylaws we need to look at are tree protection, the driveway requirements bylaw. Other very practical things are what about the services that we provide to residents around garbage collection, it's another thing we need to delve in now to solve before we get too many applications in. So as long as it's squarely connected to info housing, we're going to looking at that over the summer. And there may be some townhouse considerations there, but I think more intensive townhouses is more of a multifamily land use, and that's the topic of the upcoming OCP update for next year. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call the question if we're all those in favor. Any opposed? None opposed? Then I think a motion to adjourn is in order. So moved. Oh, yeah. And we are adjourning back to an in-camera meeting that was earlier suspended, so we'll have that motion here. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed? Take 3 or 4 minutes. Just stretch your legs. For those online, I think we should come back into the Teams meeting. Is that correct? Okay, so if you could just disconnect and then come back into the Teams meeting, we'll see you there in a minute.